Okay, everybody, thank you for being here. I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Trustees to order. Can we have the roll, please?
Yes, thank you. Trustee Goldberg.
Here.
Trustee Gould.
Here.
Trustee Levinson.
Here.
Trustee Rosner.
Here.
President Torby.
Here.
Thank you. Adequate notice of this meeting had been posted in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. In addition, notice of the meeting was posted in Village Hall and on the village's website. It has been filed in the office of the village clerk. Official action may be taken at tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Could everybody please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if everybody could please stay standing for a moment of silence to honor the memory of everybody who lost their lives in Newton, Connecticut, and their entire community. Thank you. Okay, we've got a couple announcements tonight. Just a reminder that the 2013 schedule for the Board of Trustees meetings has been published. If people haven't heard, we are returning to the older style of meeting format with the conference agendas as the second meeting of the month and the regular business the fourth meeting of the month. We're hoping that's going to facilitate more discussion about issues especially arising from committees and streamline the business process. Additionally, all of the executive sessions will now begin before the meeting at 7:30 p.m. and the meetings will begin at 8 p.m. So that's also to try and limit the amount of time that we spend in closed session. And again, just we're trying to find new ways to make our meetings more efficient. To find the calendar for our meetings, as there are a couple of exceptions to the second and fourth Monday rules, just visit the website at southorange.org. Another reminder also about the Essex County Holiday Light Spectacular at the Turtleback Zoo. You can enjoy free admission to this great event December 14th through January 1st. And they're also taking donations of non-perishable food and unwrapped toys and winter coats. And another reminder, please, if you're not signed up for our emergency alert system, please do so. Residents, business owners, students, during emergencies and during extreme weather events, you get the most up-to-date real-time information from the village if you sign up at southorange.org/alerts. That information that you sign up there is only used for emergency notifications, if that's the box you check off, and that will allow you to get email, voicemail, and text message alerts during an emergency. So please, if you're not signed up, do so, and make sure everybody in your family and your neighborhood is signed up. Next, we had a presentation for the 2013 Street Fair. I don't believe the gentleman is here yet to do that, so we'll hold off on that for a second. But at this time, I'd like to open the meeting up for any member of the public who wishes to comment at this time. There is a second comment period. If people do find something they do wish to comment on later. So I will close public comments and we can move on to the approval of minutes from the December 10th, 2012 meeting.
I move.
Second.
Moved by Trustee Rosner, seconded by Trustee Bauer. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm going to abstain since I wasn't there.
Thank you. And we do have a, oh, okay, great. We do have a resolution for separate action that allow us to briefly go into executive session to discuss the Valiant Third Redevelopment Plan with the Village's Redevelopment Council. This is Resolution 2012-286.
Yeah, let me read it into the record. This is a resolution authorizing an executive session at the December 17th meeting of the Board of Trustees. This will be our first session for executive.
Thank you. Yeah, there will also be an executive session at the end of the meeting, as per usual as well. Excuse me. Just a question as far as procedure goes. By passing this resolution, is that recessing us into executive session, or can we pass a resolution and then someone can, at a later point in time in the meeting, make the motion to go into this executive session? This is just authorizing it, correct?
Yeah.
It's not actually...
We always pass them at the beginning.
Yeah, no, and to go into executive session, it's
Okay.
just for.
Do we have a motion?
I'll move.
Moved by trustee Rosner,
Second.
seconded by trustee Bauer. Can I have a roll call, please?
Thank you. Trustee Bauer,
Yes.
trustee Goldberg,
Yes.
trustee Gould,
Yes.
trustee Levinson, and trustee Rosner.
Yes.
Thank you. So the resolution passed. We're now going to recess into our executive session.
Okay. So we've got a couple things before we do go into executive session. At this point in time, I believe Mr. Darrell Walker is here to talk about the proposed October 2013 street fair. Yep, yeah, just come on up to the podium. I don't know if, were we reading on Ross also?
No.
Okay.
Another commitment.
But just make sure all of your comments are at the podium here, to the microphone,
Because it's got to pick it up.
so it can go into the record.
My name's Darrell Walker. This is my son Adam. So I'm here to give you a little presentation as to what occurred at the first street fair. That was held on September 30th, 2012. I have a multimedia presentation, 30 photographs, about a 2-minute video. That's about it. It's going to take me about 3 minutes to set up.
We don't have a projector set up.
Yeah.
I've got everything,
Okay,
self-contained.
all right, why don't
TV
you...
monitor and a Kindle.
Okay.
Executive session. Well, I don't know if it's literally 3 minutes you want. There was one item.
Yeah, go into
Yeah, if we go into executive session, we can put it on that computer and then do it so people on TV can watch. Because that'll take a little more than a few minutes and it'll interrupt this meeting. Are you okay with doing that? We have it set up so that people at home can watch the presentation if it's loaded on this computer, if you have a PowerPoint presentation.
What kind of presentation?
No, what I have
Or a
is
website or anything.
Okay, I have a monitor. It's a 30-inch monitor.
Why don't we go in there and let him set it up while we do the executive session and Steve will come.
Okay. All right, so what we're going to do, we have a brief executive session that we're going to recess into, and then in that time, however you guys want to set it up, you can do so, and then we'll come back out and hear
Is
the
this
presentation.
table okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve will help you.
I can speak from here, but
Yeah.
I'm going to put the monitor on that table if it's okay.
That's fine. Could I have a motion to recess into executive session?
Recess.
Still on the table.
Okay, motion by trustee Rosner, seconded by trustee Gould. All in favor? All in favor?
Yeah,
Any opposed? Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Sorry for that interruption. At this time, I would like to hand it over to Mr. Darrell Walker from Street Fairs LLC. He's going to walk us through a presentation about street fairs in South Orange. Mr. Walker?
Okay, this is actually on the internet. If anyone wants to refer back to this at a later time, the URL is streetfairs.org/South Orange, all lowercase, one word. So we had a great time on Sunday, September 30th, 2012, in downtown South Orange. Right on South Orange Avenue was the first annual South Orange Street Fair, held on the street on South Orange Avenue between Vose and Scotland Road. Also on Village Plaza, and we also used the park. We had about 7,000 spectators come throughout the day, and many of the businesses participated and the nonprofit organizations in town. I have a quick 30-slide show, and then a 1-minute video. So over to the left, you'll see Dunkin' Donuts got in on the action. There he's hanging out with a Michael Jackson impersonator. She's actually a female from Newark, and she did a Michael Jackson impersonation. Testing. Can you hear me?
It's not so much for us, it's really more for the people at home, as opposed to the TV.
Okay, here's a shot of the park. We had live music. We had a DJ. There's Michael Jackson. I should say Mikkel Jackson, a.k.a. Michael, doing her, she'll be doing the moonwalk in a little while. There she is. The street was packed, and the purpose of the street fair is to bring as many people from South Orange and surrounding towns to the village for a free family day of fun. And while they're there, to visit all the merchants, the restaurants, linger in town, hopefully go to the movie theater, have dinner, and realize that South Orange is really a destination point with the SOPAC Theater. Okay, I got to move this up a little bit. This is Woody, the stilt walker, with a downtown merchant and his wife. There he is. Get a little. Okay. I'll go through this a little quicker now. So there were 70 merchants and businesses, vendors, and nonprofit organizations participating. You see there are rides for the kids. Here's SOPAC's booth, front and center. This is kids waiting online to go on the moonwalk. There were arts and crafts for the kids. There's Maquette with a couple of spectators. This is a business in town, Squeezed Fresh. This is a nonprofit in town. Here's SOPAC again. A view inside the moonwalk. Another nonprofit in town. So everyone had a great time. This is Mark. Let me go back to that one. If I can find them. I don't know if I can find him, but he owns the karate store in town. He thought the fair was phenomenal for his business, and he requested the same spot for 2013. We have you scheduled in for September 29th, Sunday, for next year. All right, here's a 1-minute video. Let's see. I guess the sound is off on this. Oh, here we go. Sorry, I'm not used to this laptop. So we actually got him dancing on the street in the park. That was great. Does anyone have any questions?
I've got a couple of just quick questions. Thanks for the photos and the quick presentation. And the questions are, do you have any idea, 2 questions, do you have any idea how many, or any way to gauge how many people were at the fair that were South Orange residents versus out of town?
Yes. Incidentally, I've been running street fairs for 25 years. And we've done surveys in various towns. We run 41 street fairs throughout New Jersey and New York State, 37 of them in New Jersey. And we found that, and this is a surprising number, only 20% of the spectators are actually from the town where we hold the street fair.
It's an average from all these different
From all the towns, yeah. The other 80% come from all over New Jersey and from New York City. So that's why the purpose, as I mentioned, is to bring as many spectators from all over to the village for a free family fun day. And that way, the stores will benefit from the traffic, and also it's free advertising for the village as a destination point.
What was the feedback from the business community in town?
Well, I have all positive, by the way. I have a 5-page merchant survey. Adam, would you mind handing out copies of that?
Well, I see it online. There's only 5 responses. Were those the only responses you got?
Well, no, because I only solicited 5 responses, and 5 out of 5 were positive.
Not very scientific. Why didn't you solicit all the merchants
Because-
or all the exhibitors?
Well, okay, there's another merchant here who I didn't solicit in the audience. You can ask her, or I'll ask her if you want. How was the street fair for you?
It's a thumbs up from the audience member.
But again, why wouldn't you be interested in soliciting feedback from everybody as opposed to just cherry picking people that are going to give positive responses?
It's not a cherry pick. It's a random survey. Anyone can conduct a survey, but it becomes overkill at some point.
But it's a random survey that all says the same thing. I question the validity of it, that's all.
Okay. All right, so here's what the survey says. And the survey says, okay, this is from Patrice Hairston, Indulgence Day Spa. Street fair was good for my business. I gave people a choice. Was it good or was it bad? Patrice wrote, she's the co-owner, it was great. We should do it twice a year. Lots of new clientele. Thanks. You know, when you get 7,000 people into the village in one day, I can't understand how it could not be good. So I can poll 7,000 spectators and every merchant in town, and I guarantee you, with a margin of error of 1%, you're going to get 99% positive.
That's absurd. You have no basis. I mean, I could tell you countless people that had issues with the street fair. It caused problems with parking, caused problems with traffic, and the quality of the merchants were really the biggest concern. It really was not a high-end event that we were promised. It was not an arts fair. It was a low-end street fair.
The, okay, we never promised an art fair.
Well, originally, that's what it was pitched as.
No, it was not an art fair. You see, it was billed as the South Orange Street Fair. And we run street fairs.
I think there was an intent, Michael, that the Recreation Department and a resident were going to try and get artists to participate at another part of it. And it was going to be a street fair and arts fair, not that he was going to be doing the arts fair. I
And I
think that
think-
was the original intent.
Right, and we had a meeting actually, last year, there was a resident who had been interested in helping out and for one reason or another really dropped the ball, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And so one of the merchants in town, Ross Fields, has offered to sort of spearhead the effort now and work with Darrell Walker. And we went back to the rec department again. And this year, Sandy Martini, who directs cultural affairs, is much more comfortable helping out now that there's a resident who's really, or not a resident, a merchant who's really handling the event. And she's offered to help to bring the artist in this year. So we're hoping it'll be much more of an arts component than there was last year because we actually have someone's running it.
But didn't we also say last year we were going to go out for an RFP and put out an open process to see who the right vendor is to do this? I don't understand why we're making an assumption of who will be doing the arts, who will be doing this crafts fair, this street fair.
I don't remember saying we're going to do an RFP, but I think the intent is that after this year, that the SID would take over the event rather than us, and Ross and to somewhat Robin, to a lesser extent, theoretically, are going to try and spearhead it from that point of view to turn it over to them. So, and I think they were comfortable working with Mr. Walker last year and felt that they would like to continue that route. So I don't want to speak for her, but that was the impression I had from Ross when he came to the rec meeting to go over this with us. And I know that they had spoken to some merchants themselves, particularly Ross, and was fairly comfortable with the event, and that several of the business owners were happy with it.
I think a lot of people were, from what I've heard from people, including Ross, was that they liked the event but were not happy with the quality of the exhibitors, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed.
I think he said they would have liked to have more vendors, more retail vendors.
Less home improvement vendors,
Right.
less
He didn't say-
newspaper sales.
He wasn't selling so much less of anything. He's wanted more of the other types of retail vendors and that kind of thing. And he said that's what he hoped for. But that's also, I think that's the kind of thing that builds over time. I don't think it happens overnight.
Yeah, this was the first annual, and we are going to work on that to get more retailers and more artists involved. But the first time you do this, the artists are not going to flock to it. They want to, we can be more choosy as this thing builds over time. Basically, there's 70 slots. That's all we have. We have enough room for 70 merchants and vendors and nonprofits. And so we can be more selective because more people will apply to this.
How many
space.
applications did you get the past year?
In the past year, this
Yeah,
was the
for the
first.
70 slots. Do you remember about how many you got?
I turned away about 10.
Okay.
But most events we do, I have to turn away quite a bit more.
Okay. Are we expecting Mr. Walker to work with the board on doing this year, or are we expecting that to go to the Village Center Alliances for 2013?
The Village Center
If-
Alliance wasn't ready to take it on for this
Okay.
year, so that's why Ross had volunteered, because he wanted to see it happen. So I guess it would be through the rec committee. I haven't really thought about how we'd process it through rec, to the rec committee, Mark?
I guess for this year, you would
Yeah,
have
for
to.
this year.
And the other, again, elephant in the room, Mr. Walker, you are aware that we do have a special events ordinance that stipulates that any third party that puts on an event is responsible for paying all costs of police overtime, public works overtime, et cetera. I just want to make sure you're aware of that, because I believe this board said that would be enforced this year. We looked the other way this year, but it would be put into place this year.
I said we do that for all events, then we can't pick
Has
and
to be
choose.
consistently.
So like the Newstead 5K or whatever else it is.
That's a non-profit, Mark. This is a
But
profit-making
our
enterprise.
ordinance doesn't state that, so we're going to have to either change
So
the
let's
ordinance
change
or
the
make a
ordinance, but there
policy.
should be a distinction for non-profits versus a profit-making enterprise.
Okay. Okay, I wasn't aware of that, but I had gone into this. By the way, I don't charge a fee, so you can go for an RFP, but it's moot. I don't charge a fee to anybody.
To the exhibitors, you do.
Yeah, but I don't charge a fee to the village.
Right, you need to pay to the village, is what I'm saying, based on our ordinance,
Okay.
to cover our expenses.
Okay, well, the SID or whoever wants to sponsor this for 2013 will work with me and we'll figure out a way to make the village whole.
Good.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm going to be able to pay for the expenses. I think I was told the expenses were what, $1,500? This was basically, with 70 vendors, I can't contribute to this because my expenses leave me with either no profit or a few $100s. So
Why can't you increase the vendor amount? I'm just curious, just the amount of facilities you have? Or?
I would love to do that. By the way, of the 41 street fairs we run, this is by far the smallest that we run. The largest one we do is 325 vendors. In that case, we pay the police bill.
Where's that?
Red Bank.
So why are you held to 70? Because if we could work with you to get 30 more vendors, what would be the problem with that?
As a professional, I took a look at the footprint. In other words, where we can put vendors
Right.
in South Orange for the best result. In other words, getting the most people into town.
Right?
And the footprint that I determined and then the police agreed to was just as I described earlier. On South Orange between Vose and Scotland and Village Plaza. If you were to extend any further than that down the trestle, towards the trestle, you would have a virtual nightmare for the traffic department.
Okay, the same thing going on to Sloane Street as well.
Right, you need to keep that open. If you're going to be closing South Orange, you need to keep that open so that the traffic coming down the hill on South Orange Avenue can make a right turn in the Sloane.
I don't want to go into the whole thing about the footprint tonight, because I think there should be discussion between Ross and the rec committee. I actually think there is a way to extend the footprint very easily without making it a traffic nightmare. And, we can discuss it based on past experience of events we've done in the village. I think we could very easily extend the footprint and probably fit in another 30 to 40 vendors without too much trouble.
Okay,
We don't have to
It
debate.
sounds
We
like
can do
you're
that
open to
offline.
that discussion and.
Yeah, offline
you know,
we can.
That's something that we can work out. Do you have any other questions for us?
No questions. I just want to thank the village, and I want to thank Howard Levison in particular for getting the ball rolling on this. I think, he really, with his foresight, he made this happen. There was a lot of business done that for the merchants.
One of the other questions, and I don't know if we ever got the answer, because the original intent was to coordinate it with Seton Hall's parent weekend. Do you know if,
We tried, but they changed their mind
last year they changed the weekend. Do you know if, because I know that there were some email exchanges with Adam, I don't know if we coordinated
They haven't
the
locked
date
in.
that you
That's a
have.
Ross question, I don't know.
No, it's the week after, but they haven't locked in the date yet. So,
Yeah, we, last year, 2012, we chose the date based on their
Right,
parents' reunion, or
yeah.
figuring that there'd be more
right.
spectators.
I think this year we just have to advertise better to Seton Hall students and see if they'll come down. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be a great thing if they coordinated their event now, but we're basically locked in on the September 29th, 2013.
Okay. One more quick comment is, and I'll try and follow up with whoever's working on this at some point. But it'd be great. I don't know how much was done with this, but as far as when people are visiting town, and using social media, if there's some way to do some kind of additional specials or giveaways or whatever, people coming into town and checking in on Foursquare and things like that. by putting out hundreds and hundreds of check-ins on social media, that one day could create a real buzz for South Orange, in those communities. So that's something I'd love to follow up with whoever I'll try and not forget about that.
It's a great idea.
Because that just gets our name out there even more. So unless there are any other questions, thank you for presenting, and thank you for working with us on this. It's definitely a great thing to be doing for our downtown, support our merchants.
Thank you very much. Happy holidays.
You too. Moving right along, we do have an ordinance on first reading tonight.
Thank you. This is ordinance 2012-24. It's an ordinance of the Township of South Orange Village approving the Valley and 3rd Streets redevelopment plan, which amends and replaces the Central Business District redevelopment plan for Block 2304, lots 3 through 9, and South Orange development and zoning ordinances.
Thank you. This is a plan that the Planning Board has looked at, our Redevelopment Council has looked at, and is now before us for consideration. I don't know if Mr. Baumann, there's anything that you want to add for the public's benefit for this?
Sure. This is an ordinance introducing the redevelopment plan for the Third Valley redevelopment project. It's consistent with the ultimate goal to have this parcels of property developed. There's actually, I believe, a picture online at the website if you want to take a look at what Jonathan Rose is proposing. The ordinance, once adopted, will allow us to go to the next step, which will be for a redevelopment agreement, a financial agreement, with the goal of trying to break ground in the spring of next year. So if anyone has any questions about the plan, I'd be happy to answer them. I'll be back for the public hearing at the next meeting on the ordinance.
Thank you. Thanks. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Could I have a motion, please?
I move.
Second.
Moved by Trustee Levison, seconded by Trustee Bauer. Call the roll, please.
Thank you. We'll start with Trustee Goldberg.
I can abstain. I need to spend some more time reading this.
Thank you. Trustee Gould.
Yes.
Trustee Levinson.
Yes.
Trustee Rosner.
Yes.
Trustee Bauer.
Yes.
So ordinance 2012-24 has passed on first reading.
Thank you.
To read the statement. I need somebody to do the public hearing.
Yeah, someone needs to do the...
Deborah's job.
It's on Deborah's.
Yeah, Janine.
I move that ordinance 2012-24 be set down for second reading and final passage at the January 28th meeting of the Board of Trustees, and that public hearing be held at that time, and that the village clerk be authorized to take the necessary action regarding public notice of such hearing.
I second.
Moved by Trustee Bauer, seconded by Trustee Rosner. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And just a reminder that when we're going around and doing the voting, the only comments that will be recorded into the record are yes, no, or abstain. Before we move on to the consent agenda, I know we have a discussion item that one of our staff is here to address, and I want to see if we can do that a little bit sooner in the meeting. And that is the questions around the community garden finances.
The issue is Trustee Goldberg met with Kate and myself because he'd been contacted by members of the community garden as it relates to the way the community garden is being run. They want to have control of the finances, and there seem to be a couple of issues. So we met, we came up with a few ideas. I then spoke to John as the CFO and ran those ideas by him. He had some objections to what they wanted to do. So we don't really have an answer. So we need to sort of discuss this and see if we can come up with a different plan. There's a lot of work for recreation involved right now, and that seems to be one of the issues, in that registration is done through recreation. If the community garden wants to buy anything, they have to have Diane or someone from recreation go to Home Depot with them. We have to then, process the purchase order for them to buy the supplies. There's deposits that are being held, there's then refunds that need to be done.
Could you summarize the different options that are available, including what's happening now?
I'm not really, I mean, John objected to the option that the community garden had proposed. Michael, do you have?
Yeah,
something to
thank you,
say?
Kate. And just to clarify, basically what they're, for everyone's benefit, currently it's a $50 registration fee and a $20 deposit, which they get back at the end of the year. So that's goes in, goes out.
And they're paying that to whom?
To the village.
Okay.
And that $50, goes obviously to, the intent of the garden when it was established was not to have any net cost to the village. So that $50, in theory, was really to, ideally and conceptually, to build up a sinking fund or a fund that they could use to maintain the garden over time. The initial garden was built without any money. It was raised through grants and through contributions from the members. But over time, the raised beds, the wood is going to rot, the fencing needs to be replaced. There's going to be expenses to upkeep and maintain the garden. Hoses need to be replaced and so on. The problem is, from my understanding, the way the village's fiscal system works is that, everything that comes in, that year has to be spent that year. Whereas the garden sort of wants to accrue money over a period of time and then use that money when they need it. And because we basically have to have a zero balance at the end of the year, anything that is left over goes to surplus and becomes accessible to the entire village. It's not really segregated money just for the garden. So that's why the idea was proposed by Ellen and Kate, that perhaps they become essentially their own nonprofit, for argument's sake, for lack of a better term, and control their money, and then they can use it and use it or lose it as they like over time. But because it is village property, there's some nuanced issues, which is why we kind of came to this issue. So that's point number one, which is probably a more complicated issue we may not solve tonight. Point number two, which we do need to talk about tonight, which sort of ties to this. In addition to the $50 and the $20, next year they wanted to move to just a flat $70 registration fee. They found the administrative efforts of the deposit were too much of a nuisance. $20 wasn't enough of a deterrent to change people's behavior. In other words, the deposit was intended to be, if you clean out your space and you're a good gardener, you get your deposit back at the end of the year. $20, people were not too worried about it. So they said, you know what, people are willing to spend the $70, let's just make the fee the $70. And again, that will play into what I talked about before about giving them enough money to accrue money over time.
What's the cost of the village every year?
It's really virtually.
I see them bringing mulch. I see them cleaning the leaves and stuff.
That's it. It's mulch and the hummus, right?
So we have.
Mark, other than the.
And how many hours of labor for DPW?
Well, Tommy does not have any substantial cost. At least that's what he says.
So we're talking probably $1,000.
What the garden did was spend the money that they collected this year, and that paid for the mulch and the whatever it is that they used over there, which was about $2,500. So in other words, we took it in and we paid it out. Where the dispute, I guess, if there was one, arose is that the money that had been collected in recent
prior years,
that they assumed that
they were
they
entitled
had
to
built
it.
up and
Yeah.
were entitled to spend. So that's where the question came in.
This is the third year?
Yeah. So again, one issue. Number one, they want to raise the fee to $70, and Kate and Ellen.
My response was it needed to be done by resolution. They can't just decide they want to raise their fee.
So if we can take that issue first, I think the easier one.
And then the other issue is, so if every year, if it's $70 times 30,
49, I believe.
50, whatever it is, 50.
49 plots. Yeah.
Whatever about. So the question is, Barry. So if we take away our expenses, is there a way for us to segregate money on this?
Yeah, I think where it happened, somehow it jumped into this idea that if they were going to become a 501c3, and the issue there was then they are technically a private entity, and how do we give them exclusive rights to this piece of land as a private entity, or do we have to do an RFP, et cetera? But I think, and I don't know, I'll talk to John about this, I don't know why we couldn't set up a sub-account like in Recreation Trust specifically for the community garden. The trust accounts do not lapse from year to year. They don't go into surplus. As you know, the trust just carries over and you just maintain a balance.
So before we just raise the fee, why don't you and John figure it out, come back to us, and we'll do it all in one shot.
Yeah, but you've got a more fundamental problem is
who are you giving the land to and on what basis?
We're not giving them the land.
No, well, you're leasing, you're permitting, somehow there's got to be a legal vehicle by which you allow them on municipal property to do the gardening.
Well, and I think as the way it's currently structured, that component is addressed, because technically the village is running it through our, I guess, rec department, and it's open to any resident that wants to, first come, first serve, or whatever. So that I think I'm comfortable with. It was when that was going to become a new separate entity with its own accounts or whatever, then it became, you can't just give them exclusive rights to this piece of land because somebody else wants to.
So fine.
But I think if the real concern, and maybe I wasn't tuned in as much on this, or I'm not sure why John didn't suggest this, but I will certainly follow up with John, and I think we could set it up in the rec trust account as a dedicated sub-account just for that, and in which case
and
then
do
its
the
balance
sub-account,
carries
you know.
over. Was that discussed, or did?
And we're just
Yeah.
gonna,
My-
separate accounts.
My understanding, and
They didn't
I,
want to do that. They don't, you know.
Who's
we
the
used
they?
to-
Who's they?
John, as CFO, did not want to set up a separate account where the money was continually going. He thought that, we have rec trust, and I think we have the open space money, but those are really the only.
gotta get-
Well, I'm not suggesting a separate
Separate
bank account.
yeah, you don't have to.
Internally
It's a
accounted.
separate line item.
You don't have to debate it here,
Sub-account.
just talk to them.
I think we can work something out.
Okay.
it's been a longstanding policy of the village not to set up, I don't even want to call it trust account, because it certainly wouldn't be a trust account in any sense of the legal word trust, but even sub-accounts, because I remember years ago, the Environmental Commission asked for that, and the answer is no. And I was also under the impression, maybe I'm wrong about that, but John certainly gave me the impression that anything is swept in at the end of the year. There's no, everything gets reappropriated and whatever. And we talked about that when we talked about, although we didn't define any policy, when we talked about the quote-unquote grants or whatever they're going to be, fees for services by the nonprofits, because people were talking about, well, every year, the Environmental Commission will come, they'll ask for $500 to do River Day or something like that. Why don't we just give everybody $1,000, and that way we know. But still, the understanding was that would be swept in. You don't use it, that's it, it's forfeited. It's all village money. It's village money. It's not anything else, because it's going to give completely the wrong expectation to people, and then they're going to forget what the policy is and so on and so forth. So I don't know what the law requires, but it's not a bad idea.
Okay.
But it sounds like, simply put, that either the trust account, as a line in the rec department budget is one option, and if that doesn't work for whatever reason, then the only other option really is to set up a separate 501, a separate nonprofit entity for the community garden, and then create a service level agreement with them that leases to them the use of the land.
But then that
Property-
implicates
that's a
there are certain
property
statutes that
Then you gotta
cover
go
leases and
lease the-
sale of land and
Absolutely.
auctioning and giving anyone
Absolutely.
first crack at it,
You
and
don't
that's the
wanna do
problem.
that.
I don't know what the prior policy is.
you
I
don't
do
wanna
know
do that.
it is certainly permissible, and everywhere I've ever been, have had sub-accounts in a, say, recreation trust
Absolutely.
account, for example.
But in fact, we do have it for the Environmental Commission, because they made money from the last river garden, and they put it into a separate account.
All I'm saying is John's
but that's for
policy
the
was,
same year.
it sweeps
No.
in.
Okay, well, we obviously need the CFO for this discussion, so Mr. Lewis, if you can follow up with him, that would be great. Has this been discussed in the rec committee at all?
No, the community garden has never been discussed in
It's
the rec
sort of,
committee.
it's sort of it was sort of a project between Trustee Goldberg, former village president
Yeah.
Doug Newman. They sort of took the lead
Because
on it.
this appropriate that we even had tonight is really more appropriate for a committee meeting, not for a board meeting. So if one of the committees can take claim of this,
Okay.
Come back
claim
with a
it.
written policy like you did with the baseball.
You want another 3-page memo on it?
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, I'm just saying,
But could
I'll
you write the
take it.
policy?
but if the next step of this
But write the
discussion,
policy before the meeting.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
if the next step of this discussion can be Mr. Lewis reporting back to the rec committee, this can be discussed, and then whatever options are being recommended can come back to the board, that would be great.
And in the meantime, to the second point, the fees, Mark, the reason they want to do that, we want to discuss that now, is registration starts in January.
Oh, it
So
does?
just want to make sure nobody has any objection, and I assume in January, our first meeting, we can have a resolution that sets the fees for the garden
Okay.
at 70 instead of 50 with a $20 deposit. Does anyone have an objection to that? That's what their request is.
No, so you want $70 and all, you need to work on a
$70
resolution
with
or
no
something.
deposit, right? Mark?
Yes,
Right.
correct, that's
Okay.
correct.
So there's no refunds at the end of the year?
Yeah, it'll save you the
already?
administrative hassle of all of that, that's right.
When do they start registering for this, Kate?
It's in January.
15th, 16th, I saw the date from John.
All right,
Yeah, I
so
don't
we'll put it on the
remember.
meeting for the 14th?
Whatever our first meeting in January is, yeah.
Perhaps. There's not supposed to be any business on the 14th.
Barry, I'd like to put on the finance agenda as well, discussion about having those accounts as a policy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks both for coming.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions about this? Okay, I'd like to move on to the consent agenda.
Thank you. We have a few items on the consent agenda tonight. We have a Chapter 159 resolution requesting approval of items of revenue and appropriation. This is pursuant to NJSA 40A 4:87 in the amount of $33,997. This is for FEMA assistance to the firefighters grant for the aerial truck. We have a resolution hiring seasonal staff for the 2012-2013 winter recreation program. A resolution granting raffle license number 1226 to Marilyn of the Oranges. This is for an off-premise cash raffle. We have a resolution granting raffle license 1227 to Marilyn of the Oranges Academy for an on-premise merchandise raffle. We have a resolution granting raffle license number 1228 to Temple Shari Telfelo, Israel, for an off-premise merchandise raffle. And we have a resolution authorizing a second executive session at tonight's meeting of the Board of Trustees.
Thank you. And those items to be included are PBA collective bargaining under contract matters, attorney-client status of a personnel investigation in South Orange Parking Authority, under personnel matters, performance evaluation process update. Was a rights notice issued for the CFO? Okay, so then performance evaluation of the CFO, replacement of the assistant to the administrator, and police promotions, as well as South Orange Rescue Squad property acquisition. And we had ICMA on there, but I'm not sure if there is anything to discuss in executive session.
I was actually going to pull it off because I don't think there is anything for executive session, although we do need to have a discussion about how we are going to...
There's going to be a discussion item later tonight to talk about the process moving forward.
Oh, right, it's not on the agenda.
Yeah, we just realized that instead of executive, this should be public tonight.
I agree.
Today. Are there any other items for executive session?
Yeah, I want to add 2 items for real quick updates. The SID Executive Director search and the SOPAC Executive Director search. Just an update for a few seconds.
Okay. Are those, do those qualify under the exceptions? Okay. Okay, are there any comments on the consent agenda? Or do we have a motion for it?
I move.
Okay, moved by,
Can you just give some explanation for 287?
Yeah, this was, and I think we mentioned it, but you recall the original FEMA grant that Chief Markey obtained for the fire truck was based on an estimate of $700,000. We got 95% grant. When the bids came back into his credit, Chief Markey had the chutzpah, let's call it, to go back to FEMA and say, will you fund 95% of the overage? And he got them to agree. So this is 95% of the amount that the truck bid came in over $700,000. So this is just anticipating that revenue and then setting up the appropriation line.
Thank you.
thank you. There's a motion by trustee Davis Ford,
Second.
second by trustee Rosner. We call the roll, please.
Thank you. Trustee Gould?
Yes.
Trustee Levinson?
Yes.
Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Trustee Bauer?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
And Trustee Goldberg?
Yes.
Thank you. So our consent agenda has been approved.
I have can I have a status because I missed the voting on ordinance 2012-24. What was the vote? If you could share that through you, Mr. President.
That was the redevelopment plan
Yeah.
that passed.
Okay. Could you add my vote to that?
I
I don't think so.
You can vote on it when it...
Yeah, you can vote on the second reading.
Adopt it, but you can't
Oh,
That'll be back on second reading on the January 28th meeting.
oh, okay.
I think we should consider having Chief Markey do our FEMA grant application and be the one who follows up with them.
That's right, it's got connections.
Okay. All right, so that's the consent agenda. Next is the introduction and approval of the 2013 Special Improvement District Management Corporation budget.
This is, we consider it as a budget resolution, so this would be Resolution 293. This is the South Orange Village Center Alliance fiscal year 2013 operating budget.
And just this, I know this is because the alliance in the Special Improvement District is new, just under the statutory scheme, it sort of tracks like the municipal budget. There's an introduction and adoption, then there's advertising, and then a public hearing and adoption by resolution. So this is the first step in the process.
Thank you. I know we have the chair here tonight, if he wants to give a 30-second overview. If not, unless anybody wants it.
My only question, I missed the budget meeting the other night. This was included in the budget and it's fully funded our share?
Yeah, the village, all the village contributions identified in the budget that the Alliance presented last Monday night are accommodated for in the draft budget that I'm working on.
Thank you.
And when does the assessment go into effect?
Assuming that we've talked that normally, typically these are done quarterly and billed separately, not with the tax bills because they're not a tax. So it would be effective. I mean, even if we adopted January 4th, it would be retroactive to January 1. It'd be a year long, and then the billing we'd coordinate with the Alliance.
So this, I'm sorry, so this is voted on as a resolution, but we do it twice?
Yeah, it's like the budget. You introduce by resolution, and then you adopt.
Okay, and there'll be a public hearing at the next meeting as well?
Yeah, it has to be
There'll
advertised.
A public hearing at the January 28th meeting, and just to jog everybody's memory, the budget, if I'm looking at the right numbers, was $251,916.70. The total budget,
and
not the village contribution.
Is that notice to all of the property owners in the district as well? Is that part of the statute?
No, the statute doesn't require individual notice. I mean, they got notice about the formation of it, but no, this is just advertising in the newspaper, posting in the village hall, library, wherever.
Okay.
Is there any reason we couldn't do this at the first meeting in January? That was my assumption that we were going to
other
try to
than
do
we're
it then.
28-day notice.
Yeah, under the statute, it's got to be a 28, not at least 28 days between.
And that makes 28 days, am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think
29.
the 28, if I'm 17, today's 17, so 14 more in December, 14 in January. We would hit 28 on the nose. I mean, we could do it. I think it was more because we're going to the workshop format.
Right.
The 14th was a workshop.
That's correct.
Not
So
supposed to be action
all
items.
business going forward, unless there's an emergency, is going to be on the 4th week of the month, including this.
What I could see as an emergency, and again, we're going to talk about this at executive director search in the back, I just would like anyone coming into the position to know rather immediately that the budget's been passed by the board, that there's no outstanding issue with that. So to me, that's a bit of an emergency to move it up.
Well, through you, Mr. President, aren't there times when you have a conference meeting, but you can have one item or two items that have been identified for a vote?
Yes, although we're very much trying to avoid that. I do not think this is an emergency in the slightest. This is for actual emergencies, like we will miss a contract, we will be fined something. All business is to be done the second meeting of the month, the 4th week. That's the agreement by doing the conference agenda the 2nd week and the business meeting the 4th week. And I'm really, really, really not comfortable giving an exception the first meeting of the month to a process that we're all trying to do right.
I'm just concerned that as we negotiate with a potential SID director, that SID director is going to be concerned about where our budget is. And I would hate to lose what our first candidate might be by not having the budget voted on that 14th meeting.
Yeah, that's a good point.
This is a unique situation. I think that this would, I mean...
Well, there will be a vote tonight. So
Right.
I understand
unless they're going to assume that
And,
people
and
can
they
change
can
their
come
mind
to
between
the
now
meeting on
and
the
second hearing.
14th and ask a question about it if they like to. You know, I really do not think this is an emergency. They'll see the vote tonight. If there are any comments that people voice tonight, those will be into the record. If there aren't, it'll be in the record that there were no comments. I imagine that anyone going for this position probably understands municipal process enough to appreciate the fact that we wouldn't break our own rules,
But,
just for out of convenience.
Just to give you my background and experience in personnel for a couple of decades, at a senior level, if the primary candidate that is going to be considered for this has to give notice for the position, I know I would not give notice
Funding
unless I'm
wasn't in
sure,
place.
because anything can happen until the vote is taken. And so I understand exactly what you're saying. It's a slippery slope if you start it. I respect that. But this is unique. We're not going to form any other organization with an executive director. So this is the only thing I can think on the horizon, period. So I think that this unique situation, knowing that a professional is not going to commit to anything or give any notice until this is passed, so that may delay the start of someone another 2 weeks, because professionally you give a 2-week notice. So if they wait it out until it's passed and we're into February. So I think that's where the sense of urgency is. So I would encourage you to rethink this, and maybe, I think I made the business case for this to be a unique circumstances.
I personally disagree, and I'm not going to add it to the agenda. However, people by motion, when we're done with this, can certainly move, and if there's a majority among the board that do want to add it to that agenda, we can do so.
All right, that's fair.
And I would again voice my opinion. I think that's a mistake. Anyway, what we're considering right now is 2012-293, which is the budget.
That makes sense.
So unless there are any other comments or questions about the budget specifically, we did discuss it in our last meeting. I'd ask for a motion. Moved by Trustee Levison.
Second.
Seconded by Trustee Rosner. Could we call the roll, please?
Thank you. Trustee Levinson?
Yes.
Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Trustee Bauer?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Goldberg?
Yes.
And Trustee Gould?
Yes.
Thank you. So the budget has been approved upon introduction.
And someone is free at this point. If you'd like to, I'll give you the opportunity to make a motion to add this to the
I move.
agenda for the
I
January
second.
to the agenda for the January 14th meeting. Is there a motion by Trustee Davis Ford and a
Seconded.
second by Trustee Gould?
You actually have it, so we're going to have a special meeting right after this conference agenda,
Right.
right?
Yeah, but this is a continuation of this meeting.
Before,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, could we call the roll, please?
Thank you. Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Trustee Bauer?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Goldberg?
Yes.
Trustee Gould?
Yes.
Trustee Levinson?
No.
That was, thank you. So our second reading and public hearing will be scheduled for January 14th.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope this doesn't become a pattern next
No,
year.
I agree.
I
with you.
understand that you think it won't. However, every case is going to be exceptional. People are going to have their own ideas about why something is unique. It's not really worth discussing more. Just again, like to caution people, remind them that we set these meetings up for a specific purpose of not doing business the second week of the month.
Okay.
Next is a resolution for separate action.
Thank you. This is Resolution 294. This is a resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of not exceeding 34,440.
34 million.
I'm sorry, 34 million.
I wish.
$445,000 in general obligation bonds, Series 2013, in and by and for the Township of South Orange Village in Essex County, determining the form and other details of such bonds and providing for other matters in connection therewith.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis, do you want to give a brief summary of what this is?
Sure, and Trustee Levison may also weigh in. Obviously, he's been involved in this. You'll recall that, well, the village has currently a significant amount, $34 million in short-term financing bond anticipation notes that roll over from year to year. This was a point of significant concern to me since my arrival due to the volatility and the potential that we're at historically low interest rates, but they can change in a hurry, and if they change in a hurry and we're locked into those higher, and all of a sudden we're locked into high rates before we can roll into permanent financing, it could have potentially catastrophic consequences. So one of the things we did was to, recently we approved a contract and contracted with Phoenix Advisors, a financial consultant, who reviewed our existing debt, reviewed the market conditions, and came back with a recommendation, which was summarized in the spreadsheet that I handed out at the budget workshop last week. And what the proposal is to, because while we're at historically low interest rates for bond anticipation notes, we're also at historically low interest rates for long-term bond financing. So they came up with a plan where we can roll all of our bands into long-term financing. Because the other component with bands is you have to convert them to permanent financing not later than the first day following the close of the fourth fiscal month of the 10th year. So basically after 10 years you have to convert them. After 3 years into a band you have to start paying down principal. We have started hitting into band pay downs that are, it was $800,000 this year's budget. It will only escalate from there, and we will rapidly be on the 10-year that we have to convert them, and the likelihood that these interest rates will still be in place however many years down the road seems very slim. So they were able to put together a plan where we roll all of our current short-term funding into long-term bonds. And if anyone has the schedule, but basically our total projected debt service, including band pay down if we were to issue new bands subsequent to this issue, and that center column actually includes additional money. So if you took that out of the equation, it's actually saving more. But where essentially our debt service stays level or constant, the far right column, if you're looking at it, is, I don't know why they do this, but it's sort of different than normal accounting convention. The parentheses are actually increases, not decreases. But so the first few years we're just up slightly over our existing debt service, and then the real payoff is down the road where it drops off. But in short, we lock in the certainty of really historically low rates. We avoid this escalating band pay down that we're looking at. And one additional benefit, each time we roll over these bands, there are costs for bond counsel, financial consultant, fees associated with the bank. Typically could be $25,000 or more a year, each year. So we eliminate all that as well. So basically what this, the resolution that's on the agenda tonight is authorizes us to go out for that sale in January.
Just another comment. What we asked the advisor to do is to forecast what the savings would be over the 15-year period, given some interest rate sensitivity, and they were very conservative. And in fact, it's about a $4 million savings over the 15 years, but if you take the net present value of that, it's about $2 million savings. So it is very succinct with taking advantage of today's rates.
I have two questions, and Howard, you could probably answer both of them. Number one, did this complete our work with Phoenix, or is there, I mean, that's the extent of the contract we had and we're done with them at this point?
Yeah, there's a couple other things that we've asked them some questions, but yes.
I think it was like, what, $2,000 is what we paid, was a small amount?
$1,500.
Right.
And say anything about the ECIA?
This is the, are you gonna?
That's not part of this.
That's fine, thank you. So
This is the exact opposite of what we were doing 10 years ago when we were trying to chase lower interest rates, and you kept redoing bonds to get lower interest rate bands, and we went to bands to keep, so we would be able to do this. Now that interest rates are so low, we want to lock it in while it's low. It's actually, and it's also the exact opposite of what insurance companies and banks were doing 10 years ago, and some banks and insurance companies went bankrupt playing this game. So it's good that we're going to be able to lock this in at a historically low. And also, this is the one where the Essex County improvement is also going.
No,
it's not. That's a separate.
But
Yeah,
we're taking the tax
It is going into this.
refunds.
No, that's not in this
Okay.
because that Trustee Rosner was referring to. In addition to our existing band debt, we have existing indebtedness to the Essex County Improvement Authority associated with SOPAC. And as we discussed earlier, and I was aware of, and Phoenix confirmed it, and Trustee Levinson was aware of, that particular financing model was based on a pool of a bunch of borrowers, and as they have slowly gone away and either refinanced or paid off their obligations, the pool narrows and narrows, and yet the administrative costs remain static, and we're the last one standing, to the point where we are now absorbing such high administrative costs as part of the Improvement Authority that our net cost of our money, it's not the interest rate, but the actual cost we're paying exceeds 9%. So that obviously was also not good for the village. So that is something that Phoenix is aware of, and independent of this, because that involves what they call bad money, which is it only means they have to be taxable bonds instead of tax exempt. And Without getting into too much detail, it largely relates to the fact that there's commercial revenue derived from Clearview that renders it non-tax exempt. But we're going to proceed, and that will be likely, hopefully soon, January, February, to take that out with a bond sale of their taxable bonds. But even
That's
in
the
the
other thing
taxable
that-
bond, we're thinking maybe in the
4%, yeah.
And that will
percent
save
range
us
instead of the 9+.
$125,000 a year or so.
But the advisor is advising you on that issue as well.
Correct,
To
yeah.
go to
That's-
the question of trustee
What
Goldberg.
remaining work they have to do.
Do we need additional contract, or that's within
No,
the
that's
scope?
within
No,
their,
that's within
that's
the
within
scope.
their scope. yeah.
Good news. And this sort of, again, I think you already answered this question. So just to restate it in real simple terms, essentially this is taking our existing debt in bands, converting it to longer-term debt. The dollars are essentially the same, plus the $805,000 for the tax appeal bond that we talked, that was
Plus a
on the agenda
previous-
last meeting.
Plus a previous tax appeal.
Okay. But it's not incurring any new debt, it's rolling over existing debt plus the tax appeal
Yes.
bond.
With lower interest rates.
No, I get all that, right?
Right.
It's not incurring new debt.
No,
Well, the
except
new debt-
money, the only new money
the
is
tax.
the
Right,
new tax appeal, that's it.
$805,000.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
It's just, we're locking in low rates. It doesn't necessarily mean it's lower rates. We're locking in the historic low rates now.
Now, this is a pretty solid long-term investment in our finances and in our debt structure. I definitely would just like to quickly thank Trustee Levison and Mr. Lewis for making sure that we're doing this. Probably one of the smarter financial decisions we could make at this point, as far as securing ourselves financially in the long term.
And one more question, did bond counsel weigh in on this at all?
Yes.
Yeah, he
He put it
prepared all the
together.
documents, and
And
we'll be preparing all the
He's
documents.
approved it, he's okay with it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, he's,
And
says
the
it's a
auditor.
long time coming.
Are there any more questions or comments from the board? If not, I'd like to ask for a motion.
I move.
I
Moved by
second.
Trustee Levison, seconded by Trustee Rosner. Call the roll, please.
Thank you. Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Trustee Bauer?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Goldberg?
Yes.
Trustee Gould?
Yes.
And Trustee Levinson?
Yes.
Thank you. So the resolution has passed.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to the approval of bills. Trustee Levison.
I move that the list of bills audited by the village treasurer dated December 10th, 2012 be approved. The Board of Trustees have been provided a copy prior to the meeting for examination.
I second.
Moved by Trustee Levison, seconded by Trustee Rosner. If there's no discussion, could we have the roll, please?
Thank you. Trustee Bauer?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Goldberg?
Yes.
Trustee Gould?
Yes.
Trustee Levinson?
Yes.
And Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Thank you. So the bills list has been approved.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open the meeting for our second public comment period. If there's any member of the public who wishes to speak at this time, please come forward. Okay. Seeing as there are no members of the public who wish to speak, I'd like to close public comments and move on to the report section of this evening's agenda. The first is my report on kind of an ongoing Open Public Records Act and Open Public Meeting Act update. I've still been speaking, as I reported last time, with some of our state legislators that are working on updates to the to both those bills, modernizing them a little bit. On a sort of unrelated note, some members of the public had some comments and questions about the discussion that we had a couple weeks ago about the possible OPMA violations over email. And I was wondering, Mr. Rother, if you could just for all of our information, just resend the memos that you originally wrote up there about a year ago. I'm sure everybody has them, but just so they're kind of fresh in people's inbox. When you get a chance, if you could just resend those to us, that would be great. On another note, a company called Social Archive that I came across, I know I forwarded this out to a couple folks to take a look at. Basically what they do is they archive the records when governments use social media accounts. So this is something for a couple of weeks that I've been thinking about, and the company, I saw some article online about something they were doing. In fact, I think it was with the state of North Carolina, one of the Carolinas, I think it was in North Carolina, and what they actually did was pretty interesting, which was not only archive all of the social media records for the entire state, which is dozens of Facebook and Twitter accounts, but they made all of those records instantly searchable online by any member of the public. So that's a pretty amazing step forward in Open Public Records Act transparency and accountability. And so anyway, I spoke to the company. They have set us up with a free trial, a no obligation free trial of their software and want to give our village clerk and our IT staff a chance to look over it and see if it's something that they might be interested in trying to use to help basically respond to Oprah requests. So this would basically be for the official South Orange Village Twitter account, and at some point when we do set up a Facebook page, this would pull those records out also. So it's all the posts that go out from the village, all the messages that come in. Those are on official government platforms. Those are Oprahable anyway. So this would basically archive all of that and allow that when someone does file an Oprah request, that we'd be able to search all those records instantly and turn up those results. This service in particular has a cost of about $100 a month. Before doing anything where we're obligated to pay anything, be interested in seeing what other options are out there. I assume they're somewhat comparable, although there aren't many companies that actually do this.
When you do a search on Twitter, how far back does it go?
Twitter goes back 3,200 tweets.
Only you would know that.
Not for that account, but for that search term, right? Is that what you're saying?
They index in their service 3,200 tweets back. So when you search if you search in general, it will search 3,200 back from each of the accounts that the search term hits. And so this would archive that. That's a limitation that Twitter has right now on their API that they allow the access to information to. That the company mentioned that Twitter was at some point going to open that up to basically everything.
But if I say give me South Orange at South Orange NJ, give me their Twitter account, I'll get 3,200.
3,200 back, yeah.
Right. And I mean, I'm just doing simple math. I mean, we tweet maybe once a day at most, right? So we're talking like 10 years. Where it would take 10 years to get to 3,200 tweets, rough.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll be doing more, so that will be compressed. But yes, we're almost definitely within that.
If there's something you want to hide from years ago, you better start tweeting a lot.
And Trustee Rosner again says what we're all thinking. So anyway, that's a limitation that Twitter places on the access to their data, I believe. And that's something that just as far as the amount of computing it takes to run all those things. So at some point they're theoretically planning on opening that up. So I don't think we even have 3,200 tweets on our account. And right now we have nothing. So this would be a pretty huge step up. And they've already given access to the interface. And at some point, Ms. Klein and Stan Wilkinson, our IT person, will get a chance to take a look at that and see if it's actually easy to use. And I did a little webinar, and it looked pretty great. And they have a whole bunch of case studies. So anyway, that's something that's kind of coming down at some point. And us doing that, I'm not sure if we are required to do that the way we operate now. But it would be a really great step in the ease of which we would have access to those records would just make us again even more so a municipal leader as far as Oprah accessibility.
I'm sorry, I just pulled up the South Orange account. We have 269 tweets.
Not even close.
Not even close. So if it could take us 10 years to exceed that limit, why would anyone do an Oprah request for a South Orange NJ tweet when anyone can go to Twitter and pull it up? And why archive it now? Why not worry about it 10 years from now or 5 years from now?
Well, there's two things. One is that if someone deleted a tweet right now, it would be deleted. Nobody would ever be able to see it again. The same way with our email service, this software does not allow, it archives and you cannot delete the archive. And not only is it archived, but the attorneys in the room will appreciate the fact that the timestamps that it places on the tweets are permissible for evidence in any proceeding in court, which just searching on Twitter is not. Anyone can take a screenshot or Photoshop, what looks like a search on Twitter, but this produces legally, not legally binding, but Mr. Roth, I don't know if there's a better term. Legally admissible documents that could be used in court. So every search term it takes out, there's meta tags and every, same thing when you send an email, there's a whole string of information that you don't see in your email, and it tells you your IP address and all these different things that, as just a general emailer you would never see, but it is contained in that message. Same thing with Twitter or any other service. There's a whole bunch of meta information that's in it that's not viewable to the user, but that is contained in there, and that's what guarantees the authenticity of the record. So the way our email system is set up, it does produce those kind of results, the results that are admissible in court. This would do the same thing for the social media accounts.
And what's the vendor's name again? I'm sorry.
Social Archive.
You're talking, it's for Facebook, Twitter, social media, does that include our website also, our website page, or is that?
No, there's no information that would, there were no exchanges that they would be able, they do also do YouTube and LinkedIn if we use those.
And this is only for official village, obviously it's not for each individual
That's
member of
correct.
the board. Okay.
Archive Social, I believe it is.
Yeah, Archive Social. So anyway, that's something we've been kind of talking about. We're not at a point where we have to make a decision about spending money or not, but thought I would bring it up because it's something that, you know, we're kind of looking into. And again, if staff decide that it is interesting, and maybe with, you know, advice from council about, you know, our legal coverage as far as social media, you know, maybe we end up making a decision like that in a month or two.
How many people actually have signed up for our Twitter account?
About 1,100 maybe right now.
982.
Oh, so 982. So we've got, yeah, I know a couple people in here follow it, and that number was around 400 before the storm. So that hugely increased when we actually were providing useful information over it.
Sounds like you're suggesting having another storm to get the
I
number
knew you were
up.
going to say that. Just wait for
I
it to come out of your
know.
mouth.
You want to kick them?
So the next thing I wanted to update on is the website, although I wasn't at the last meeting. So Trustee Levison, do you want to give a quick update about whatever was discussed? If there was anything.
What we wanted to do is to go back to the, and we're now trying to put a committee
Mike.
together. Trying to put a committee meeting together. What we'd like to do is take members of the PIM committee, have a subcommittee for the incorporated as part of the web design. What we're doing right now is just going through current content and either saying, blow it away, or this is the content that we want to carry forward, you know, in the new website.
Okay.
We have a structure already put into place.
Okay. That sounds good.
And Howard, what would be best previously to share a project plan from the vendor? Can you please ask for that and provide that to us?
We have asked for that. We will. It will be put together.
Yeah, and I guess as soon as we get that, we'll share that with the board.
Can we put a deadline on that, just to kind of force his hand a little bit?
Maybe by the next time we meet with them.
Yeah.
It's probably fair.
We actually, at the last meeting, we talked about putting a project plan together.
That would
But what we
be
wanted to
helpful.
do is to get the other members of the committee involved in the development.
Thank you. So as far as kind of the ongoing, excuse me, storm postmortem planning progress, whatever you want to call it, there were some survey questions that got sent out to the board our last meeting. I haven't gotten any comments back from anybody about any of the questions. I had a couple minor tweaks. The questions were pretty good. I thought the survey was a tiny bit long, but it did get some good information. So unless anybody has any more comments they want to say tonight or email tonight, at some point tomorrow we'll get those finalized and on the website. And that'll be through SurveyMonkey or, you know, one of those sort of things. And all the submissions that come in from that will be forwarded to the board at the end of it. So probably not one by one, but once everything's together, we'll put that in one email.
And I understand all the outreach to the community, meetings to the neighborhood watch
Yeah, I was just
have been
gonna.
scheduled.
I was just gonna give you that schedule actually. The confirmed neighborhood association meetings. I believe each of these, myself and one trustee is going to.
Yes.
And I don't have the trustee list in front of me. But January 9th is the Montrose Historic Park Association. These are all at 7:30. January 10th is the Upper Wyoming Neighborhood Association, and Wyoming and Ridgewood Neighborhood Association. January 16th is Tuxedo Park. January 17th is West Montrose, and January 24th is Newstead. So if you're part of your neighborhood association, encourage you to come out to those meetings. We're basically going to talk a little bit about the village's response to the storm, the role that we play in the response versus what the county plays, the state plays, PSE&G, Verizon, Cablevision, and just kind of discuss all of that, and then try and get some feedback about what worked well for people, what didn't work well, what people want more of, what they want less of, and try and have some more in-depth conversations along the lines of the questions that are going to be posted online.
And maybe this is already part of it, but to add to that, to also find out from people what they did that made a difference as far as allowing them to have a better experience of, you know, dealing with the challenge. So that would be a nice component also.
It would be, and you know, there are some towns, for example, that have banks of generators that they will not for payment, but basically let residents borrow during these storms. People who have special medical needs and things like that. So you know, that's always an issue. People who, for example, have medication that needs to be refrigerated. If you're without power for 2 weeks, that becomes a really serious problem. So there are some towns that do that, and I'd be interested to know whether that's something that enough people want. I mean, it's obviously a huge expense for us to be able to do something like that, and liability along with, you know, allowing people to use municipal property. But again, so if those, and we'll be, you know, we'll learn a little bit about how many people use shelters, how many people didn't, how many people knew there was even a shelter available. So those will all be good information to help us figure out how best to communicate and continue to shelter people and stuff after that in the next storm, which of course I'm sure there will be. Probably October 29th of next year.
Two comments, if I may. Number one of the things we had talked about in our post-mortem meeting was also holding a town hall meeting open to everybody. And I thought maybe now is as good a time as any for, let's pick a date as to when that should be.
I think that it would be good to have it after all the neighborhood meetings, but I think the town hall meeting is good.
No, I agree. I agree after. I agree holding it after, but we need to schedule it, you know, sometime soon.
The first, some early date in February, since the last one is January the 24th, the neighborhood meeting. I agree, let's schedule it so we can start to talk it up and people can put it on their calendar. Maybe like the second week in February, because we'll have enough time to get
we'll have a BOT meeting. I was thinking maybe the off Monday.
The third Monday, is that the, when's the holiday?
That's the 18th. That's a
Probably
holiday, no?
President's
It's a
Day.
holiday.
Is that President's Day,
I
Robin?
believe so, yep.
Yeah.
Do we want to hold it in SoCal?
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
available.
I think we can
Yeah, we
that.
could do it
Yeah,
longer.
hopefully your game.
I think it would be great to do it at SOPAC.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a Monday then, can it be another day?
We could also try the first Monday.
Planning board on the 4th?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it can be a Tuesday or a Thursday.
What about a Wednesday?
Wednesday the 20th?
No, I can't do Wednesdays.
That's Tuesday the 19th, but is there a problem with that?
That works.
What date did you say?
Tuesday
Tuesday the 9th, February 19th.
Okay, that's fine with me.
February
We just need to
19th.
check this over.
Library board is the only thing
Yeah.
that's on the calendar.
You know, we can do two. This is enough ahead of time that maybe we can try and get some folks from PSE&G
That's a really great idea.
to come out and have a nice,
That's perfect.
level-headed discussion.
Yeah.
Jackets.
Yeah.
Your last DPW would have the tar ready?
Yeah, my daughter's a fencer, maybe I can borrow some of the masks for them to put on for the spitballs.
They changed some of the-
Okay, so we're saying Tuesday the 19th, 7:30 for a community town hall type meeting.
You want to contact SoCal?
Yeah, I will contact SOPAC to see if they have the facility available.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. And one other question with respect to the website. I'm sorry, the survey on the website. I'd actually asked it to be on the agenda, but I know you sort of gave the report on it, and I brought hard copies of it. I know you said you were making some tweaks, and again, when we talked about it in our meeting, we said we, as the board, would agree to it. So I don't know if people had looked at it or had feedback, or we were always said we can't talk about this stuff via email. And my biggest fear is, you know, Mark might say I want X, and Deborah might say I want Y. I just thought either maybe A, we should take 5 minutes now and talk about it. I just don't think we should wait till our next meeting.
We're not, it's going to be up there tomorrow, but I did ask for comments from the last board meeting. I did not get any comments from any trustees. So I'm assuming there were no comments.
This is what was
Right.
sent out to
Well,
us, right?
you can't give comments via email.
You can give comments via email directly to me.
No, council said we cannot.
No, you can.
Now you're,
You may.
Council?
You may.
Council, not
Wait a
again.
minute.
I solicited.
You may directly, any two members of this governing body may communicate with each other
And
on
I
email
sent it-
as you would be able to on the street if you met each other. You are not an effective majority, two of you. So if you met on the street, you could speak to each other. If you met in your homes, you could speak to each other. You could speak to each other in email.
And when I sent an email saying, please send your comments to me, you accused me of an OPMA violation, counsel.
only-
No, there was a big
Only-
difference with that, which was that you
No,
sent
and
it.
I don't want to rehash that, trustee,
right, I
but
don't
it was
either.
only because it was done without the blind copy, which invites mistakes.
And not only was it done without that, but
That's-
people replied all to it, not replied
No,
directly, and there was follow-up
once
emails
again,
sent
Let
back
me
afterwards.
recirculate, because I addressed that specifically in the memo that the village president asked me to recirculate. I addressed that issue specifically, so
But
I
is
will
there-
recirculate that.
But there's an exception, you can't chain those two people with another two people.
Oh, no, you can't.
Right, you can't have a sequential meeting.
Right, no, that you
Right,
cannot do.
but me
as
saying,
long-
if you have any comments about to send them directly to me is perfectly okay.
But I got in
Absolutely
trouble when I did
positive.
the famous pool memo, and I did the same thing, and I got in trouble for that.
No.
I did the exact same thing.
No.
Yeah, I got in trouble for that. I was
It's-
scolded for that.
it's-
I did the same thing, reply to me
Please,
directly,
it's
do
when,
not contact anyone
it's
else.
when it's done, it's when
That's
it's,
ridiculous.
Did you
When it's
CC or
done-
blind copy?
I don't.
when it's
That's
done
the
in a
difference.
way
No.
that permits a response to
But
all, that
it-
I always have a problem. I don't want to see accidental violations, which are just as bad as intentional.
Let me just put it very simply. The simple way to do that is to blind copy everybody. So if somebody makes a mistake and hits reply all, it will only go to the sender instead of everything. I think that's what he's saying. Is when you say reply directly to me, don't CC, because if somebody inadvertently hits reply all, then you create a potential liability or exposure for a violation of OPR. So it's very, very simple.
In any event, the
I'll
point is,
recirculate all my memos, and you will see I addressed that issue specifically
please
in those memos.
the point is that if people do send feedback, we all don't, because we don't see it.
We don't know what it is.
We don't know what we're getting.
Right.
So I just thought it'd be worth taking 5 minutes to, if anyone, let's talk about it right here and now.
Oh,
So if
that's
you say,
good
if you
idea.
say X and you say
Right.
Y, let's
That's
Great
know
idea.
what
That's
we're
perfectly
talking about.
understandable.
This
There-
is the place to do
Right.
that, exactly.
That's my
There
point.
were no comments. Nobody did send any comments.
Because, well, I
But you
put
can
it on
certainly
the
have them
agenda
now.
for discussion.
All right,
Right.
let's get
I mean,
through this.
are there any comments on this survey from any of members of the board?
I have one comment, and maybe the council, this is a question for you. I'm sorry you don't have, I'll pass you a copy. Number 4, and this was done largely by the chair of the Citizens Public Safety Committee. It's one question. Do you or anyone in your household have special needs that the village should be aware of during an emergency? While I think that's a noble effort to capture that, I mean, do we really even... I'm just afraid it's a privacy issue, or people are going to start volunteering that. It just seems like an odd question in a survey that's good. You know, who would volunteer that?
I'm actually more concerned that the person says yes, and something we don't respond to it, that we have a value.
What I was planning on doing, with that question was at the end of the survey, having that question saying, if there is anyone who does have these special needs, please contact the South Orange Police Department at the desk number, and they'll take that information down as they've
This
done in
is
the past.
absolutely what we want to
Or
pick up.
they can also email that email address, emergencymanagement@southorange.org. So that will keep the information separate from the survey and still gather the same data.
So this is absolutely what we want to capture in the new Everbridge
Right.
reverse 911 situation. We need a number of people who had special needs, couldn't get the information. A lot of people who had oxygen machines couldn't get their systems recharged.
Right, what we want to do is build a GIS database of all of those people.
Yep.
And make it very easy to reach out. I mean, during the storm, you know, I got some of those records from the police department and the fire department, and I visited many of those houses myself. But the records were, you know, not, well, I don't know about obsolete, they weren't complete, certainly.
And which questions are we anticipating would be required? Are we saying everything's required? Certainly, we said previously name and address, right? We don't want people stuffing the ballot box, per se.
If somebody doesn't want to answer, they go to the next question.
Yeah, their personal contact information, their name and address, and email address, I would say, would be required, and the rest would be optional.
You may want to put another chance for people to sign up for the emergency management.
There will be a link to that as well. So the 2 links at the end are going to be one for people to submit their special needs contact information if they do have them, and the other is a reminder at the bottom that says southorange.org/alerts.
Now, you said you had some tweaks to this. Do you want to share with us what tweaks?
Yeah, they were pretty minor. For example, on the days with the table with the number of days, there's 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11, 15, and 16 plus. As far as I know, there was nobody 16 plus. They were all restored in 14. So taking that out and rearranging the days a little bit would make a little more sense. And instead of NA, it's really not NA. It's really 0.
We rename broadband as internet. I mean, I know what it is. You know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, there's
average person knows.
Yeah,
there's
that's a good point.
There's a couple things like
Because
that.
the average person wouldn't even know what that.
One of the changes was taking out Maple Online and putting online message boards.
But we have Facebook and Twitter listed.
Yeah, but I don't think that
There are no other online message boards.
You want to distinguish from
or maybe.
telephone?
What's that?
You want to distinguish the type of telephone?
I'm sorry?
Distinguish the type of telephone, either wire or
Yes.
voice
Actually,
over.
Or both.
Yeah, that's great.
Or list
Yeah,
both.
that's right.
Yeah, that's great.
Landline, cell phone.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Or your telephone. for
Because a
the
lot of
cable
people had
company versus-
longer outages with the wired.
That's right. And the reverse 911 system that goes to the landlines is different than the emergency notification system that goes to the cell phones.
And some people may not, again, know what you mean by landline, seriously. So you should say home phone or mobile, so people.
Home phone can be IP too.
I know, but if you say, a lot of people don't know what landline is. They really don't.
So
I said that to half the people I know.
I think number 3 is vague. I wouldn't really know.
Right,
the
I would-
way-
no,
I don't know what
that's
that is
also
either.
not going to. I don't know when this draft was from. That's also not going to be the wording was not going to be that. The wording was going to be the definition of what that is instead of that phrase. It says, "Do you have a family emergency plan?" It was going to just be the definition instead of using that phrase, which people might not understand. It's going to be, "Do you have a plan to keep your family safe?" Something like that during an emergency.
Even that, I don't know what that means exactly because it depends on what kind of emergency. For number 8, are you registered for emergency South Orange notification system? I would add an 8A, which is if no, do you know how to register for emergency South Orange? Because some people may say no.
We'll just provide the
And
link
you could
to it.
Put put an asterisk
Yeah, the link will
in
be
there, but, yeah.
very obvious as we've made it.
And for number 11, I would give, even though it's a comment box, I would allow a comment box, but I would give some choices that people could check off because otherwise we're going to have to interpret, everything from a few words to, a whole paragraph as to, well, what does this person really mean? And it could be a lot easier to just check off like communications, Wi-Fi spots, I don't know, this and that, information about transit, whatever.
I would have
some
another-
obvious things there.
I would add another reason why to do that, because I'm one of the type of people going through this, and if I have to stop and fill something in, I just leave it blank. So if you give me a box to check
But
off the choices.
there's a value to having people put their own comments in somewhere. And in fact, I think that question is more value than number 10, which, asking people how satisfied are they with the response of South Orange. Unless we're also asking people how satisfied they are with the response of PSE&G, how satisfied they are with the response of New Jersey Transit, how satisfied they are with the response of their cable or telephone company, the question really doesn't have any value to us because people are going to lump all of
No, I'm
the
not saying
response-
take away the comment section.
I know.
I'm just saying comment as well as some option.
To
Right.
add to that, leave the comment, but also add checkoff boxes because, unless I'm really, really incensed, and by this time I'm just going, you have to.
Well, not
Lazy.
90% of the people are going to say, turn on my power quicker.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of obvious.
On number 1, Alex, instead of NA, maybe you should just put down 0 days? I
I did say that.
You did that?
already.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was must misleading.
On number 2, did you relocate as a result of the storm? When I read that, again, what does relocate mean? Did you sleep at a friend's house for a night? Did you go to a hotel?
Yeah, again, I don't know what version of the draft this is, but that's an old
This
version
is
of
the
the
one.
question.
This is the only one we ever saw.
Okay, so this question I rewrote to ask people where they relocated to. Was it a family friend? Was it a shelter operated by the village? Was it a shelter operated by the county? Or was it a hotel?
Okay.
So I don't have the document in front of me, so if people can send me those comments in email, I'd really appreciate it.
So you said you're going to do this?
Would you resend? Because I don't recall getting this. So I must
Sheena,
have-
Okay, yeah, we all got it about a
Sheena
month
sent this to all of us.
Oh,
Yeah,
This one, we didn't see another one.
I guess I'll re-forward it. but if people can get the comments in as quick as possible.
Thank you.
And can you send us your modified version?
Yeah, I'll let you know what it is before I post it.
And can
Another,
you let us see and review it before it's posted?
Yeah, we could take a very, very quick
When
review.
is-
I mean, we don't have to spend that much time
when
on
is the
it.
timeline, when is the goal to get it posted?
I was going to post it tomorrow morning, but now we can't do that, so maybe by the end of the week.
All right, so everybody, today is Wednesday, everybody should get stuff to you by Thursday, you know.
What day is today?
End of
Today
day.
is Monday,
Oh, God.
and everybody should get everything in by Wednesday. So you were close with half.
I need a vacation.
Deborah.
I need
So if
a,
everybody could get all the comments by Wednesday, that would be much
right,
appreciated.
okay.
And then you'll
Except
send
for
it
Deborah,
to
that's
us
Thursday.
on Thursday, and we'll post
That's
it on
priceless.
Friday? Is that
So,
what
yeah,
you're saying?
that sounds about right.
I need a sabbatical.
Okay, moving on to the next update about New Jersey Transit. So there's a number of pieces here. I had a lengthy discussion with Jim Weinstein, the executive director of New Jersey Transit, and we talked about a number of issues. I had that conversation about a week ago, mainly centering around the train schedules, but also talking about actually redevelopment opportunities in front of SOPAC and the kind of whole New Jersey Transit emergency preparedness issues. As far as schedules go, and Trustee Rosner, feel free to correct me if I'm misstating anything, but between my conversation with the executive director and Trustee Rosner's meeting with transit officials, the understanding of that meeting is that although it wasn't really as great as it could have been or that we hoped it would be, there were a few things that were worth reporting on. And just let me know if I missed anything. Okay. One is that the schedule examination that they were planning on doing when they came to our meeting, when we had Governor Cody and our assembly representatives in New Jersey Transit here, the commitment, the 6-point commitment that we kind of nailed them down to, one of them was reviewing the ridership numbers to look at crowding on the different trains and then to report back to us with those numbers, and we would meet and discuss them. That process got pushed back because of the storm. So they said that they will have those numbers for the end of this month, and that when they do have that, then some village officials will sit down with them and go over those numbers. And if there's a really obvious fix, like this train is overcrowded every single day, they, I think, are in a position to make a commitment that they will then make those changes. And if there's anything that's a little more questionable, you know, we're certainly going to push for any of those changes that could come out of that. Another thing was, again, one of the things we discussed in our board meeting, all these things kind of got pushed back because of the storm and their recovery from that, but is trying to find an express train, one that doesn't stop in South Orange currently, but one stop in South Orange could be added. And the idea is to try and change the schedule post leaving New York Penn Station or Secaucus. When you have to start rearranging the schedules in New York Penn Station, it becomes a juggling act of hundreds of trains that are coming in and out every day, and it's much easier to try and get a change a little bit further down the line. So if there's a train that stops in Summit first or something like that, is to try and get that train to stop in South Orange first and then Summit, only adding a few minutes to the ridership for the other trains, stations on the line, but providing our residents a great deal of relief for their commute. Obviously, we also talked about the equipment. And before the storm, they did add a couple cars onto some of the trains. I don't know the exact numbers, so I don't know if those are still there, but most of their double-decker equipment was damaged during the storm, so that's been a little slow to come back onto the tracks. But what they have committed to is, if there is crowding on any of the trains, to look at adding a car or switching out single-decker trains for double-decker ones. So from the reports I've heard, the trains have been less crowded than they were right after, it's gotten better. The schedules is still kind of a different issue. But the insane overcrowding that was happening on every single Midtown direct train it has improved a little bit.
Although I think, like we said at that meeting, clearly people adjust their schedules to people are staying late or leaving earlier, finding other modes of transportation. It's a bit of a moving target, and there's really no way to exactly nail down what people are doing. And one of the last things, which is obviously not as important as the schedules, although still nice, is that they are committing to looking into seeing if they can put TVs with departure vision in the station. So instead of trying to understand the intercom systems, which somehow seem to have never improved since that technology was invented, people could actually see when the next train is coming. So that would be a nice
addition to the station. Additionally, I know I've talked to the mayors of West Orange and Livingston also, because they both run shuttles into South Orange. They've also talked to New Jersey Transit, and the three of us talk, and any advocacy that we have to do, they're going to also do as well. So it's not coming from one mayor and one governing body; it's coming from three. And that's in addition to our assembly representatives, our state senator, and the county executive. All of them have been lobbying for us and will continue to do so. I think the next step really, again, Trustee Reisner, correct me if I'm wrong, the really next step is getting those numbers back of the different ridership levels, and then we can kind of take it from there.
Yeah, and I just want to, the meeting was set up by a resident. I met with 4 residents as well with them. The next step is they're going to be doing what they call a speeded up version of getting the data for January. They want to do it post-holiday, post-Sandy, post-everything. So they're going to get the first 2 full weeks in January, which is like the 7th to the 21st. And then the same group is going to meet with them at the end of January.
Sorry, getting the numbers during the holiday season doesn't really...
Yeah, so they want to and go over the schedule, the potential changes for the schedule. And the next schedule change, they usually do their schedule changes in March. And some tweaking they might do is, removing a stop or two from the, what we call the dreaded 619 now, because it has 8 stops on it, to get that down to a more reasonable number. And then see some of the other changes included what you mentioned before about changing one of the trains to just virtually just adding South Orange to that stop. And they talk about all kinds of things when it goes from 3 tracks to 2 tracks, or the signal issues and stuff like that. It's all similar to the gobbledygook we heard from them like 10 years ago, and we went to the same issue with them to get the schedules changed then when they pulled a similar stunt. And the overcrowding on the trains between 5 and 6 seemed to be improved. The 6 and 7, between 6 and 7 it's not. And as I pointed out to them, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you make a horrible schedule and people readjust their schedules to hit other trains, it's hard to get real data. The data is all jaded because it's forced people who might have taken one train to rearrange their schedule to take a train, anything they can to avoid the 619 right now is really what it comes down to.
Probably the most interesting data is like the first day or two after they adjust the schedule,
Yes.
before people have time to adjust their schedules.
And that data they have, which they have not shared with us, actually I shouldn't say they haven't shared with us, they didn't seem to have station by station data. They have train by train data for the whole line, which is another kind of bizarre type of thing. Somehow I always get the feeling they're just winging it and they don't really do their homework, and they take the path of least resistance and go for the easiest schedule without really thinking it all through. And this is what you have to always force them to do, is you have to say, no, you really have to think this through. It doesn't make sense to take an express stop and turn it into a local stop when you got 3 people getting off at one station. I don't want to pick on any one station, but some stations literally have 3 or 4 people who get on and off, and you got 500-600 people getting on or off at South Orange, Maplewood, and Summit. So you need to move the masses and worry about the local stations as a fill-in or off a true local train that can run in behind the expresses. But
Thanks.
anyway, so we're meeting at the end of January. I'm supposed to call the person back this week to make sure everything's on target, and to see if he wants to have a interim meeting with the elected officials from the 3 towns. So.
Okay, and we'll post this latest information along with the resolution that we did pass our last meeting on our website. Maybe get some more publicity for it. There are a couple other things I wanted to report on. On the New Jersey Transit topic, one of the things we've been discussing with them is also redevelopment opportunities in town. And the site that I've talked to them about before, and I think Trustee Bauer, you were at one of the meetings with their, I forget Vivian Baker's title, planning and development, or
Chief planner.
planner for New Jersey Transit.
Chief.
I said she.
Oh, no, chief.
Oh, chief planner. Yes. Oh, okay. And anyway, talking about the parking lot in front of SOPAC and that whole parking area there. And seeing if there's anything that we can do as far as structured parking, residential living, commercial, plaza space, anything like that, that would really add value also to the river project that's going through there. That whole space could be really beautiful and provide also daytime parking access for people going to SOPAC, which is a huge problem right now, which is we're trying to address sort of through some other means. But anyway, so that was a conversation that we've had a couple times with them, and our next meeting with them to talk about some rearranging some parking arrangements is also going to include this subject. Transit has talked about wanting to do more TODs or transit-oriented developments. They have I think their last one was in Morristown. And anyway, that seems like a possibly really great spot for it. So anyway, just going to follow up with them about that. One last thing is just a reminder again on the meeting format. I made the announcement in the beginning of the meeting. But I also just want to remind everybody on the board that those conference agendas really are for discussion, not for action. And just to get, and we're going to say the same thing in the next department head meeting, but that when we think about when business is being done, that everybody up here, all 7 of us, need to make sure to think about action being taken only once a month on the last meeting of the month. And that second meeting is really for discussion and emergency items. And that's always going to be open to interpretation, but just to try and reframe our mindset about it, is it's not every 2 weeks anymore. Resolutions and ordinances are going to be typically once a month.
And are we going to have department heads at the conference meeting, which they should be, so that they're available to answer any questions, so we can expedite, so that when we have our board meeting, all questions have been answered or good time, that we can just vote. The board meeting should be relatively short.
That's correct.
What did you just say?
It should be relatively short.
If we do this right and we have the discussion, if we do this right and have the discussion and have a good enough discussion in the committees, which we're still not quite doing to the degree that we should, and then have a good discussion in the conference agenda, by the time it comes to a resolution or ordinance in the board meeting, the public will have had ample opportunity to hear about it. The trustees will have had ample opportunity to discuss it, and those meetings should really be 2-hour meetings. We should be getting into executive session at 7:30, getting into public session at 8, and we should be getting out of here by 10 o'clock, because all the questions theoretically will have been answered already, and there'll have been plenty of time for people to have that information. Okay. So I really hope we can stick to that and run these meetings a little bit more efficiently. And I just hope that everybody is on board with that. It's something we've all discussed and agreed to as being a priority, and that we can all kind of support each other in making these meetings a little more efficient. And on that note, I will end my report. Mr. Lewis?
Okay, for the benefit of the public and anyone watching, we did have our first budget workshop last week. We've now scheduled one for January 22nd. Is that correct? My memory. Did we schedule another budget workshop? I thought it was January 22nd. Am I correct?
Yes, we did.
No. Yes, correct.
Okay. At which point we'll have a lot of more of the year-end data and go forward from there. Also, in light of the practice which is permissible, it's not one that I've done before, but of the recessing this meeting, that takes a lot of pressure off because we just got the final payroll posted, so that'll give an opportunity to kind of digest all those numbers and make that determination. Right now, my first blush, I just got the report today, is weighing that in whether we need to do an emergency appropriation, whether we can accommodate it through transfers. It's the first blush looking better than I had initially expected, so I'm leaning towards not doing it, but we do retain the flexibility by doing that. So that'll be on for our meeting when we recess this to January 14th.
And Barry, did you want to comment on the range of increase that you think we're at for next
year?
Well,
as I indicated at the workshop last Thursday night, which of course was not televised, my initial draft of the budget, kind of plugging in the numbers and where we sit, I had indicated that I was quite comfortable that we would not have any issues with the property tax levy cap, which of course does allow certain exceptions for items that might go up. Also further indicated that I was comfortable that on a net gross increase in the overall tax levy, that my initial draft I was slightly below 2%, and I felt that with some work and pending sort of the final numbers, we could get that close to 1% without making any significant cuts in service or operations. To get below that, we'll have to start potentially making some hard choices, but that's the way I think it's shaping up right now.
And that's a municipal tax, because a lot of people, when they
Right,
hear
yeah,
that, and then
yeah,
they see.
With the caveat, we have nothing to do with the school budget or the county budget.
Yeah.
No control over it.
But did that include a capital plan from each department head for different projects that they had?
Well, as the only, it included sufficient funding in the capital improvement plan to fund a certain value of capital improvements, then that'll all be coming from the department heads.
Okay.
$3 million is the number I believe you told us.
Right, that we had sufficient for a $3 million capital plan, which is
And how much of that
consistent.
goes to roads?
Third of it.
Historically, about a third.
1.5?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really $1.5 million is what I'm.
No, but you got grants that
Yes.
reduce that.
Gotcha.
We are continuing to work on our FEMA reimbursement applications from the storm, pulling together all the data, all the stuff. This final payroll plugs in, gives me the information on the end of that 30-day window and any overtime. So we'll be submitting that, had the initial meeting, and we've been assigned our person. We'll kind of begin the process of going back. We're going to try and push that expeditiously to get that funding, obviously, the sooner. And particularly if we go not via the emergency appropriation, then, and we are able to absorb the cost that we did in this year's budget, then any reimbursement we get is simply revenue next year in the budget, which obviously would help as well. Village Hall, we had a meeting last week. I just via email received this afternoon the minutes and a bunch of documentation from our construction manager. So my intention will be this week to provide you, albeit remotely, a memo with a lot of that backup documentation. We're waiting on some final numbers. We've gotten the information back from the cost estimator that has started to hone things in, but are waiting to plug in a few numbers. But look in your mail this week to receive an email where I will attach a lot of this documentation and track through the all the different information, including the latest stuff that we received. Also, I started working on, was not able to get it completed, but again, before the holidays, so by the end of this week, I will also, I've been working on kind of giving an updated sort of status report, year-end report on the status of a lot of the major projects, departmental things, so committing to get that to you again this week before the holidays. Those are the items I had, and other than that, just questions.
Barry, who's covering it? I know you're taking some extended time off for the holidays. Who's covering in your administration for you? I'm
going to be talking with Robin and some of the various department heads and sort of have a clear allocation of who's in charge of what, and we'll have
Because
that
I know,
in place.
I'm sure you get plenty of calls from residents and vendors and all kinds of people
Right.
that call into your office. We don't want to leave them.
Yeah, and regrettably, I check all my emails and I also check all my phone messages while I'm away, and as needed, I respond to all of them, so it goes with the territory.
Thank you.
Thank you. Finance and IT?
We didn't have a meeting.
Okay. Legal?
We met last Thursday, and it's always a robust agenda, and I'm not going to report out on anything tonight due to the time at hand, but one of the items that we did talk to, and it's on the executive agenda, was the vacant position for assistant to the administrator, and we have some suggestions on how to move forward that we'll discuss, that recommendations we'll make in the executive meeting.
Okay, thank you. Planning and zoning?
Yeah, the great advantage of not moving that clock back is it saves time on the meeting, huh? Planning and zoning is meeting on Wednesday night.
Thank you.
You'll circulate an agenda, Mark?
What?
You'll circulate an agenda?
I did.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. That one we have an agenda. Public Works meeting an agenda for. Yeah, I'm sorry. You're correct.
Okay, public safety?
Public safety, we are meeting on Thursday. And actually, if we can just take a second, I don't know what you said, you had ICMA on the agenda. Can we talk about here, or do you have it somewhere else on the agenda?
I had it for discussion.
It's listed on this?
Yeah.
Fine, it's fine.
Public Works?
Public Works is meeting later this week, later this month. However, I'm not confident that that'll happen because of the holiday.
Okay. Recreation?
We're going to meet next week, the 27th, and we'll be having a robust discussion about the community garden.
Fantastic.
Yes, and the street fair.
You like that word, huh?
When is that meeting, Nancy?
That would be the 27th at 6:30. Come on, come one, come all.
I'm Trustee Gould, I'm so happy to share that descriptive vocabulary word with you.
So we have a couple of discussion items. The first by Trustee Gould, protocol for resolutions requiring board action.
Yes, I have a comment to make on that. I am hoping, I thought we had a policy in place that if we had a resolution, that we were going to discuss it prior to a vote, but that has not been happening. So I'd like to get some sort of an agreement that when we have a resolution that deals with a major policy issue or something that's monetary, over $3,000, I'm willing to discuss that, that we talk about it prior to putting it on the agenda for a vote. So like for a resolution today, like the Our Lady of Sorrows raffle, I don't think we need to discuss that ahead of time. But if something is policy issue or if we have a contract or a consultant contract, I'd like to see that discussed prior to it being put on the agenda as a resolution.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this sort of, I guess this came up, I wasn't here last meeting, but I know 2 meetings ago, there were those 2 resolutions, one for, I think it was Gable Associates about the energy, and the other for the hearing officer. Both of them, I think, are legitimate, but as we found out after the fact, like the hearing officer was discussed at legal committee only. It was not discussed among the full board. And so here we are, not only was it a personnel issue that wasn't discussed among the full board, but there was a monetary expenditure that was not discussed prior to us coming here. So
It should go to bed with the conference agenda being brought back.
I'm sorry?
It should be put to bed with the conference agenda.
I agree.
coming back.
Well, I think
that's the case.
I would point out on the case of the hearing officer, it was a time sensitivity. I mean, it got vetted by legal because they met before the meeting, but when we get the notice of the request for a hearing, we have to make the designation within a fixed period of time, that there wasn't enough time for 2 meetings on that one.
I
You could
understand.
have just let
I
us know
totally
email.
understand
I mean,
that.
we
yeah.
didn't even know about the issue.
Yeah, you could have sent that to us with a BCC, and then we could have had the information on that. Right.
I have a question about this. If we're, at the same time we're saying that the work has to be done in the committee so that something comes up from the committee with a recommendation, hopefully a written recommendation, so we're all aware of it at the time that it's placed on the agenda. Is it coming up from the committee in order to then be listed for discussion at conference agenda?
To do it all.
Then at the board meeting at the last Monday of the month?
We're just
So-
adding another month.
So 3 times, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, nothing is gonna get done, but that's just
That's
my-
crazy to me too, because that's defeats the whole purpose of the committees. The committees are to do the work. And the committees,
Yes, but the board has
people-
not always
it's-
respected the committee's work.
It's
But
trusted.
it would respect the committee's work if if there was a gatekeeper to the agenda so that things didn't get on the agenda for discussion until they had been through committee and vetted.
Absolutely.
I mean,
That's the whole
tonight
purpose.
is another perfect example of that happening. I know you think it's going to be solved by conference agenda, but,
It's the only way to get it, if this system doesn't work. So come up with a different method.
okay.
So-
Before you said you would support conference agenda and we agreed to it, I made the suggestion, which you agreed to, but you said only if you got conference agenda back, that we have to take a vote on what the agenda is, because I'm not
Oh,
going
right,
to
yes,
sit
yeah,
here
yeah.
and have everybody put everything back on the agenda without having gone through committee first.
Right.
So that has to be the very first thing that happens as this deliberative
I
body.
absolutely agree, because
Okay, I just want to make sure that everybody agrees.
that's where you get into this layer of bureaucracy when nothing gets done. That's the purpose of committees. Otherwise, we can eliminate the committees and we can just put everything and be here for 10 hours at every meeting. It makes no sense.
I think in addition to discussing at the meeting, I think for a while we were getting copies of committee minutes. And Deborah, not to pick on you, but I don't mean this any disrespect, but like before you said we had legal committee tonight and I'm not going to talk about everything we discussed, which is fine. I do appreciate that in the interest of time. But if there's anything, you know what I mean, but we need to get that somehow, again, whether it's via email and minutes or whatever.
You do get the minutes.
Well, we don't get committee minutes anymore. We did for a while. I'm not faulting Robin. We did for a while. We were getting all the committee minutes in our packet. We don't get the minutes sent to us
You're saying in
anymore.
the packet or distributed to us?
It gets distributed
It
via
gets
email.
distributed.
I have never received the legal committee minutes via email.
I'm actually behind on getting those distributed. I actually just posted them to the website today.
Well, you've been so very good with that I assumed that.
You guys
Thank
are
you.
on the committee, so I'm sure you get them, but not always does it go to the full board.
All right,
That
so
is
that's something
correct.
we can rectify.
But they are posted on the website.
But that's
No,
something
wait a minute.
we can rectify getting the minutes out.
But the
But
minutes-
it goes back to trustee Bowers. I mean, what's the whole purpose of committees is to do the work, vet it, have as much time as you need to really do that and come out with a recommendation.
But the minutes are delayed a month because they have to be approved at the next meeting. So you're
Yes.
delaying that approval they can't be published. They have to wait until they get approved at the next meeting.
Well, and the minutes also are, depending on who's taking them in which committee, are of varying levels of detail. One of the things that I had suggested at the last meeting is that to come up with a sort of a standard template for committee recommendations that is going to prompt you to put in, is there money, where's the money coming from, what's the recommendation, what's the issue, what was done, to have all that information provided. Because the one concern I do have is obviously the committees that happen to meet in the beginning of the month are going to have that opportunity to hit the workshop agenda and then hit the meeting. If you happen to meet the week after the workshop, now you got to wait 3 weeks to a workshop, and then now you're 5-6 weeks down the road on that committee. So the timing of the committee meeting is going to directly influence how quickly you can bring things, to fruition.
There's not a lot of things that flow out of DPW.
Take the end of the month.
Just saying.
We're moving as fast as we can.
Okay?
Yeah, but what has been decided? I'm sure.
We have to decide things here?
I'm sure trustee Gould wants some definitive
I just want to
response.
make a conference agenda that if someone's going to be having a resolution, they talk about it at a conference agenda prior to it getting to a resolution. So if, let's say, for example, I want to do a resolution on widgets, I got to talk about widgets in my recreation report, and then the next meeting we can vote on the widget.
Did you say witches or widget?
Widget
Oh, okay.
resolution.
Hey, but doing this requires change of behavior on everybody's part. I mean, for example, the items that were brought from recreation about the playgrounds didn't go through this process that you brought up last meeting.
No, I had Kate come and discuss that.
Months
Prior
and months
to the-
ago in a very vague way. So just so that you're aware, what you are suggesting,
I
don't
disagree
think
with you.
there's nothing to disagree
I brought her in
about.
intentionally so she could discuss it with you. We're
The
not
day
gonna argue
that
about
you were asking for the vote on.
No. Months before, so she could discuss the playground with you and show you and tell you what she was going to
Months
be doing.
before, a general discussion about an item, I don't think is what you're asking for. I think what you're asking for is that when an item is prepared and ready to be voted on.
I don't care if
Is
it's
that-
months before, as long as I hear about it ahead of time. I mean, I'm not going to say you have to do it 2 weeks before, just so that people know about it, that it's not sprung out of nowhere. That people are aware that this is going on and a resolution is forthcoming. Which is exactly what I did with RAC.
Okay. Procedure for awarding contracts, Trustee Gould.
That's a related discussion. Same thing, want to make certain that when we have a consultant contract and we can talk about what the low end of that contract would be, maybe it's more than $2,000 or $3,000, that's discussed with the board prior to a resolution coming onto the agenda. So we can talk about, when we're talking about it, if there's not an RFP, why there's not an RFP. We also should discuss what the consultants, if it's not an RFP, what the consultants were being told to respond to. So some sort of physical copy of what the consultants are responding to. Points 1 through 10, we require this, we require that, whatever we're requiring. Then we should get from who's ever working on this a matrix with all the responses and a comment from the committee about why they chose that particular firm to go ahead for the resolution. So the particular firm, why that firm was chosen. Because on some of these contracts that are coming through, they're pretty large-scale contracts, there are items that I'm interested in, and I might actually have some input that's important, but I'm not given a chance to even look at these things before they're brought in for a resolution. So, I mean, I'll give an example, the reverse 911. I have no idea what is in that contract and what the features of the reverse 911 are. And there's certain things I would have liked to have seen in there, but that vote came and went without me having a chance to review it and discuss it.
And since the meeting, I've asked exactly for that matrix, comparing what vendors were looked at and a feature comparison. What were the requirements? What were you looking for? And the response I got is the request was forwarded, but I don't know who that request was forwarded to.
It was forwarded to me, although I guess you could have emailed me to begin with. But yeah, we have a draft of what we were working with, and I can send that over to you.
You know, you're right. I'd like to understand why. I mean, we just went through this with C3. C3 was sold to us as the greatest thing since sliced bread. It could slice, it could dice. It's the greatest thing in the world. It turned out not to be. And now we're hearing similar language with Everbridge. Not doubting it's not, but I want to know, what does it do differently? What does it do differently than who it was compared to? I understand it's a state contract and it was the lowest cost option, which is always a good thing. It's cheaper than we have now. That's great. But what are we getting, and what are our limitations as a result?
I think I forwarded the details of Everbridge.
I've gone to their website. I mean, you sent me their marketing literature. No, I've gone to their website. You sent me their marketing literature. I want to know.
I gave you all of the features that were part of the contract.
But how did you choose them? What was the comparison of that over C3, over Code Red, over not thousands, but over the products that you looked at? I want to, why was that selected? Was it solely because it was the cheapest?
No.
No, and we can send that to you. I mean, we discussed in pretty great detail in the meetings the different features between all the different vendors.
In what meetings?
In these meetings, in these Board of Trustees
and as well as the Finance Committee.
And the Finance Committee.
At the minutes of the Finance Committee, the output of that committee should be a matrix, a document comparing the features.
There is a draft that we were working with, and again, as I said, I can send it to you if you'd like to see that.
Do you mean a draft or a template?
I mean a draft.
Okay.
But that should be to us before the vote, so we understand what we're voting on, why you chose a particular contractor for a particular job. And again, I said this last week, I think it gives our residents the best possible result, it gives them the best possible contract, and it gives us a chance to review it, and it really protects the board and the village, because everybody out in the public knows that we've all reviewed this, we agree with whatever the findings are of the committee, this is the best possible consultant because of X, Y, and Z reasons, you all did your research, this is what we've come up with, we all agree, and it's more open that way.
But the committee did do that.
They didn't share it.
But they didn't share it.
But they did review it, they did comparisons, and then this is their recommendation. I just want to make that clear. I'm not discounting what you're saying, but I want to make sure it's understood that this was just not arbitrarily done. It was in the Finance IT Committee, fully vetted, and the vendor they chose was from the state list. In order to get on the state list, you have to competitively bid through an RFP process. So it was thoroughly vetted, and then they looked at this in committee. I'm not saying what you're requesting, whatever like that. I'm not making an opinion on one way or the other, but I want to make it clear that this was done in committee as it should and recommended out to us.
But Deborah, there's been examples, I mean, public safety, for example, our friends that live near Meadowbrook Park, we talked about that in committee. You were there, right? Us as a committee, me, yourself, and Nancy, along with the police chief, the parking authority director, we as a committee made a recommendation. It came here and died on the vine. That's the board's prerogative. So we vetted it, but the board didn't feel comfortable with it.
We could have done the same thing.
That's apples and oranges. That's not a contract. That was trying to create an ordinance.
Yeah, it's different.
But it was, right, no, it's not. It was vetted in committee, it was discussed here, and the board didn't. But you're saying we should take wholesale what the committee's recommendation is.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is what I stated, I'm not going to repeat myself, and then you vote on it. They vetted it in committee, they made a recommendation, let me finish, it was put in resolution, and we voted on it, and you vote up and down. So it passed, and so what you put out here was discussed, and it was voted.
This is what I
up
said
or down.
before. You have to either trust the committee process or not. So you're saying you don't trust the committee process, is what you're saying.
That's not at all.
It's not that. I'd like to be
But
able
you
to
get the
have some
minutes,
input.
were the minutes sent to you on Everbridge? I mean, I got an email with everything, with the link to the website and stuff, so.
Say it again, Mark?
I got a link to an email that was sent, and I thought it was sent to the full board with the link to Everbridge.
No, I went to their website too. I could read a website
No,
like
but
anybody
it
else.
had a write-up, and I don't, if the minutes don't get distributed, I don't know why. They should be distributed, but if you get the minutes, are you saying you still want more than the minutes if it shows the matrix of the comparison of
That's all
code
we're
red?
asking for. I mean, just like when we go out to bid for a road contract, the engineer takes all the proposals, lines them up, says this vendor
No.
bid A, this vendor bid
But in
C,
the end,
this vendor bid C.
like ICMA, I don't remember really having the discussions here at the board. We would come back with, you came back with a recommendation, and we voted on it. We did not, we talked about what we wanted in the scope, but we didn't talk about the difference between ICMA and the other firms at this meeting.
You were given, no, that's absolutely actually not
We were
correct.
given a matrix, although I did send back some questions about it, saying, I don't know if I sent them to you or to whoever else was
And
involved.
I as well.
And I had sent back some questions, questioning why they would be the ones selected, and then we voted on it one night. I said, well, it's here, and I assume, and it's a trusting of the committee process.
You never ask any questions.
No, I
and-
did. I sent back a whole list of
And
questions.
so did I.
To who did you send
Well,
questions
I
to?
don't know if I sent them to you or to
Any of your
Alex,
questions have been answered.
No, they weren't.
but
Send
it
me an
doesn't make a
email,
difference.
Howard.
We did not have, I mean, in the end, it was, to me, it was to trust you on the committee process. It was not a full-blown discussion of the matrix.
And you were sent sample documentation of what the vendor was going to output, and their report was very consistent with what the sample documents were.
Which is what we got from Everbridge. We got a sample of the website that shows all that
This
stuff.
is what drives me
So,
crazy.
I mean, I didn't really see, and one's $1,000 a month, versus, or whatever it was. What is Everbridge?
You know
What
what?
is it? About the same as you're paying.
Can we move on,
versus-
because we're
yeah.
wasting time, and
I'm fine with moving on.
and we're like a dog chasing the tail, and this is a verbal activity trap, and I would like to move on.
I think it's important.
I think we're chasing our tail because we keep doing the same thing over
Right.
and over again, which is why nothing's changing. I mean, I think
The problem is that everybody's doing it. There were no matrix for the equipment that you talked about to purchase from the rec committee. So you're not doing what you're suggesting other people do. And if you want everyone else to do it, Trustee Gould, you will have to step up as well. Excuse me, and if we're going to all follow the same processes, everybody's going to follow the same processes. You do not get an exception.
I brought Kate in ahead of the vote so that everyone could see what the program was, what the playground was,
If
and what
Trustee
process
Levison
was
brought
going
in
through.
the CEO of Everbridge in that meeting to discuss Everbridge, I have a funny feeling you would be complaining that would not be enough time to make a decision, because what it sounds like is you want the information more ahead of time than just in that meeting. So again, I'm not expecting you to admit anything right now, but think about it when you leave the meeting tonight, that if you want everyone to follow this process, you will have to follow the process too. Everybody on this board will have to follow that process. It's not worth continuing to talk about the way that we do. It's actually embarrassing that we spend this much time talking about these processes. If people want the information ahead of time, two things are going to have to happen. One is everybody's going to have to commit to doing it, and two is that if people have a question before the vote takes place, you have to ask it. Nobody asked for anything before the vote took place.
that is not true. I sent an email to Howard in advance of the vote asking for the matrix. I never received it.
And I sent you an answer to that.
Said you forwarded my request.
Yes,
What does that mean?
I-
What does that mean? It was your resolution, Howard. I asked you for the information.
It's
You
not
did not
my
provide
resolution. It was the staff put the resolution together.
came from your
These are
committee.
Yes, it came from the committee, but it was a staff, well, I don't want, the staff put out a form, which is our standard form with the detail in the form.
Not for Everbridge. There was no comparison.
Yes, for Everbridge.
For the email, there was. For Everbridge, there was
Everbridge,
not.
there was. I actually showed it to Nancy last meeting. I said, here it is. It was listed in advance with all of the documentation attached to it.
That's not true. It compared the costs. It did not compare the features between the different.
Can we
vendors.
move on? We can have this
We can,
discussion after,
we can
please.
certainly move on, but I think the takeaway here
I'm going to use
is
the same
that
standard.
is that everyone wants a little bit more information about these things, and that means everyone is going to have to do that, whether it's finance committee or rec committee or public safety or whatever. Everybody's going to have to do a little bit more to accommodate what seems to be an apparent lack of trust in the committee process. And if that's the case, then
Wait a
that's the
minute.
process that we'll do. And I will also ask that everybody ask questions ahead of time. I never got a phone call about any of these things. Dozens of things I could list off the top of my head where there were questions by a couple trustees in particular, and they were only brought up in the board meeting the night of the vote, not Friday when the agenda went out or the week when people saw the agenda request. I mean, it's baffling. So if people have questions, pick up the phone, write an email, say, I've got a question, we need to discuss this more. There really isn't any more for us to discuss about this tonight. So I'll take a few closing comments and then we're going to move on to the
I
next
just want to
subject.
respond to one
Wait,
comment.
no, you-
Trustee Davis Ford was
Thank
first.
you.
Go ahead, Deborah.
I think President Torpey, you hit on something about seems to be a lack of trust in committees. I don't suffer from the lack of the trust. I respect each and every trustee here as a professional person who's interested in doing the most effective and responsible thing that they do. I may not always agree with you, but I always respect you as individuals in doing these meetings. I think that there's no sense in having committees and committee meetings if if the information is vetted and information is sent out, and if that's a challenge, then we need to do a better job of getting minutes or anything else out. And in closing, I hope that we really recognize the purpose of the committees and utilize them effectively and communicate out so that we don't have a full committee meeting for each and every topic when we get in our conference or our board meetings and duplicate a whole committee meeting again. That's just silly.
Alex, one comment you made about, if there's questions to let you know. I mean, it's a nice talking point, but last week there was a flaw in the appointment for the for the Public Information Marketing Committee. I brought it to the clerk's attention, she brought it to your attention, we brought it to your attention, and nothing was done about it. I don't have an objection with the appointment, but it's not consistent with the resolution. It's just some housekeeping, it should have been done. Not only did you not do anything about it, you didn't respond. And
Well, that's actually completely incorrect. The clerk and I had a conversation. I also had a conversation with Village Council, and among the three of us, we agreed that there was no legal reason to necessarily make the change.
But the resolution calls for, quote, a member of the SID board. You appointed a downtown merchant. This is not personal. I really like that person. I think they're a tremendous addition to the committee. It was housekeeping.
Right.
I just think the resolution should have been cleaned up to be consistent with the appointment.
And perhaps if we discuss it and we agree that it needs to, it will be done. But there's certainly no urgency to this, and I'm not sure what the relevancy really is to this conversation, other than trying to make a point that I did something wrong.
No, the point is, you said if you have feedback, let you know. I let you know.
And we discussed it. And perhaps,
you
I know
ignored
this
it.
is going to be a shock to you, but perhaps your feedback, although in some cases it is correct, it is not always going to be correct. So just because you make feedback doesn't necessarily mean things are going to change. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't.
I think the point was he didn't get a response. I
Right.
think that was
I think you did get a response. You did contact Trustee Goldberg, is that correct, Ms. Klein? After we had a discussion, you emailed him back, an email which I was CC'd on?
No, the response was she has shared it with you, period. I'll pull it up and read it right now if you care.
Oh,
Yeah, again, it's really not relevant.
It's completely relevant.
I'm in pain.
Are there any comments about this subject? Okay.
Yeah, I do. I have one comment because I am concerned at what level do we now look at the various expenses that we have. You take a look at the bills list and you'll find things which don't come before the board, which are fairly expensive, and we never have a discussion about them. I take it that people review the bills list and accept within their own areas, they accept what those charges are. But in a lot of cases, those things are being purchased fairly expensive. In fact, I raised the question about one of them this past week, which I was very surprised. But we don't go through that process. We don't bring those items to the board for discussion. I trust that whoever the chair is of a particular committee that's responsible for it has reviewed it and has said, yes, I accept, what's there, or can it request more detailed information about what's on that bills list.
I think Howard makes a very good point, and that could be advanced perhaps by creating, along with the template that Barry's going to, for action items out of committees or policy recommendations out of committees, is just a one-pager as to what is the chair's role of a committee. I mean, your expectation is probably not shared by some other people. I can tell you right now, if it's in the midst of the storm and Tommy makes a decision to hire a tree outfit that he has to haul in from Georgia because everyone else is busy, I'm not second guessing the department head.
Yeah,
I might review it, but it's unlikely that I'm even going to be in a position to second guess that.
But in particular, I looked at one of the bills. He purchased a couple generators and a pump, and it was over $5,000. There was, I don't see any bid or quotation.
I got you. I understand it.
No, it's an emergency situation, but there were also non-emergency situations on the bills list. And
Well, that was an
I
emergency
understand
situation.
that,
Oh,
but
was
all
it?
I'm
Okay.
saying is we don't have
Oh,
a
so there was-
procedure.
Yes.
Howard stated an expectation. I don't think that's an unreasonable
Right.
expectation, but there's no procedure that
And we don't have
flows
a
in
dollar
this-
number.
in this
Right.
body, which I understand to be a policy body, not a bill
Exactly.
nitpicking policy,
Right.
but we
Yes.
do have it on the agenda, so maybe it is appropriate to have bill nitpicking. It's just that I have to trust the department head and the administrator.
Correct.
I think if the administrator sees some money that's flowing out that's non-emergency, non-appropriate,
should we set-
non-competitive,
Should
I
we
have to
set
assume
policy
that
of a
he
dollar
makes
number, though?
first
The question
phone
is-
call, and I'm way down the line.
The question is, should the policy be set at a certain dollar amount? So if it's $10,000 purchase or more, do they have to come back to the board or something? I'm not saying that because I don't know if I want to
I
get
think
into
that's an
that.
appropriate question
But-
for finance to take
Right.
on.
Yeah.
And
But
there's, it's like
in lieu of a
how much money
policy
do we
like
spend on
that, I
gasoline
would
about the
not,
contract?
And just to
I would
piggyback,
not get in front of that.
just piggyback on what Trustee Bauer just said, we are a policy-making body, and there's certain dollar amounts that we definitely need to be concerned with, whatever. But our administrator is our COO. He's our daily operational, individual, and we're getting into acting as a operational body, and we're not. We're a policy body that is responsible for voting on the budget and approving certain expenditures under a threat or above a threshold that maybe we need to establish. But what we're dithering into, and that's what this is dithering, it is into operational
Exactly.
things, and that creates a scenario or a situation or environment for a grand dysfunctionality, and that's what this is. And so we either trust the committees and we trust our COO, our administrator, or we make changes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no question. I agree.
Okay, moving on, Open Space Committee, Structure and Purpose, Trustee Goldberg.
Yeah, there was a meeting a couple weeks ago with the Open Space Committee, and it had been discussed several weeks ago about reconstituting the Open Space Committee to, number one, see if the people that had been appointed ages ago were interested in serving, and then to talk about, what they could be addressing. And there was a lively discussion. There was quite a bit of concerns raised by the committee about, when asked if the people wanted to continue serving, largely they asked, well, they want to know what their purpose is. They kind of feel like they haven't had a whole lot of a purpose. Now, I know we need to have an open space committee by statute by having an open space trust fund. So there was two things about this topic. Number one, I think we need clarification on what the purpose of the committee is and what their charge is. And number two, I wanted to see if we could modify slightly the structure. And what I mean by that, there were two takeaways that I got from the discussion of was some of the problems with the committee. Number one, it was a kind of a one-way discussion. When we had them look a number of years ago at how to potentially spend the $1.25 million Green Acres money, they produced a report, proverbially threw it over the wall to us, and we did what we did. There wasn't a kind of a two-way channel back to them in any sort of formal mechanism. That was number one. And number two, they expressed some concern that it was difficult to get the information they needed to compile that without having staff member present. So my question, I think this is the easy part of the discussion. If it's permissible, can we extend the the resolution to appoint a staff member to the committee as well as a trustee or a board of trustee liaison to the committee? So that way, like all of our advisory committees, there is at least one of us there or accessible to them to kind of have that dialogue. And having a staff person, perhaps either someone from the administrator's office or when that person is identified, or perhaps someone from finance. And again, I know the last people want are more meetings to go to, but number one, this committee doesn't meet that often, and number two, I don't think there's a whole lot of that much work involved, but I think having access to those resources would go a long way to making the committee more functional.
I think that's a good suggestion.
Well,
Go ahead.
no,
Thank you.
go ahead.
You know, when I was the liaison back when, I think we did it because we decided we wanted to have the planning and zoning committee to be the liaison person to the space, because there was a lot of, I don't know if it was good reasons, bad reasons. I think we also left the follow-up to somebody else to handle. We actually left it to the village president to do the follow-up with him on it. But I'm just saying that, you know, that was it. And I know we had actually also suggested that the open space committee meet once a year just to go over things, and we talked about not having maintenance, not spending any money on maintenance.
Hold that, that's the next part of the discussion.
I know, but you know, and I'm also concerned that, you know, by the way, the meeting that was held was not advertised, so I'm a little bit concerned about that. And I don't, you know, and I know when you and Trustee Bauer went there, but the meeting wasn't advertised, and when it wasn't on the calendar, because I had actually specifically asked the clerk about the meeting being advertised and stuff, so I have a little bit of concern about that too, about having an unadvertised meeting. Whatever was set up, whether it was intentional or unintentional, it doesn't matter. The end result is the same. But I would be okay with taking this on at the planning and zoning committee if everyone wants, or you know, could also be argued be a DPW issue or recreation, and almost any committee pretty much, except for legal. And
Thank you.
and but that's how we had it set up originally. With the planning and zoning committee was the liaison person.
I mean, I know, I mean, again, maybe it's more of a legal question. I mean, I know you must have an open space committee. I don't know if it stipulates the makeup of the committee, or if that's something you could look at, council, if there's...
Yeah, I will. I've already made notes that I'm going to look at that, and your...
I mean, I can't imagine there'd be any downside to having a board liaison and a staff member to help facilitate the process.
I'll do a little memo on what's required.
And if there's nothing prohibiting that...
But I think we need to have a dialogue about what we expect to spend the funds.
We're going to get there. I just, one step at a time, one piece at a time.
Well, I want to continue on about, because I responded as well. That meeting was not noticed. All I saw was a request to put something on the agenda as a result of minutes of a meeting, which nobody knew about.
All right, so that won't happen again, so let's move on.
I didn't call the meeting, I just attended it, so I can't speak
So
to
we
that.
just have to make sure that we're very, very aware that we need to...
Trustee Bauer called the meeting.
And just for the record, I exchanged 5 emails with Robin to set up the meeting, to get everybody's name, address. I got their emails through her and so on and so forth. We set the date for December 6th, and on December 1st, I did email Robin and ask her to take all steps appropriate to publicly notice it. It didn't happen. I'm sorry it didn't happen, but I had no way of knowing that that didn't happen. Everybody on the committee showed up. So they all read the email, and, you know, mistakes happen, but it wasn't any kind of a secret meeting or anything like that. I fully intended it to be a publicly noticed meeting, and I made that clear in every email and every telephone call to them. So, you know, I don't check the calendar to see whether it actually goes on the calendar or not.
So with respect to the structure, council will look into it and see if we can change it.
I'll do a memo.
That would be good, thank you. With respect to the kind of the second piece of this is the kind of the purpose of the committee. And I think some of the frustration of some of the committee members, one is here, Mr. O'Leary is here in the audience, and I think some of the others have expressed it, is they kind of feel like, you know, what is their purpose? I can just express my opinion, what I think I heard from them. is that the committee should be there to sort of be that neutral, impartial third party to sort of weigh and evaluate uses of the open space trust fund. Just by way of order of magnitude, I exchanged emails with the administrator actually earlier in the year. The balance of the open space trust fund is approximately $1 million, give or take. That was at the beginning of the year. Every year it generates or it accumulates an additional approximately $250,000. So it's significant money that's accumulating in there. And the question is, what should that money be used on? And it's sort of become this catch-all that, you know, oh, we need playground equipment, open space. Oh, we need this, oh, let's use open space. And my opinion is this committee should sort of be guiding and steering that. And the analogy, I think, made sense to me. Just like a couple months ago, we said the Transportation Committee is going to be the catch-all for all transportation-related issues. We can't put a speed bump in without the Transportation Committee vetting it. We can't put in a parking regulation without the Transportation Committee vetting it. In my opinion, that's what the Open Space Committee is. We should not be spending open space money without the Open Space Committee vetting it and weighing in. I mean, because there's an infinite number of possibilities we could use that money for. We could use it for this building because it's not only open space, it's also historic preservation. We could use it for the dredging of the duck pond. We could use it for the river corridor. We could use it for new playground equipment. We could use it, you know, for acquiring open space, which was the original intent of it. There's a whole host of purposes that are permissible, and then the question is, of that $1 million that's there and the $250,000 that accumulates every year, what do we do with that so it doesn't sort of become this, pardon the expression, slush fund for everything else that we don't have in the operating budget? So I think it should be tightened up and have this committee could function as that advisory committee and vetting expenditures that we are considering and sort of being that check and balance.
I think that's appropriate if it's done according to policies that are adopted and written, like the draft capital maintenance policy that I have on the agenda tonight, and also if it occurs basically once a year with the exception of any emergencies in accordance with the development of the budget. So what I suggested at the meeting, and I didn't hear that much frustration. I heard one person frustrated at the meeting, but everybody else I didn't hear that kind of frustration from, was to bounce the policies off of them so that our expenditure, because they're always going to be our expenditures, it's just an advisory board, are guided by the policies that are developed either there or in finance or wherever they're developed, recreation, whatever, and that as projects come about, because obviously in a built-out town we're not going to be acquiring it for open space, and I would disagree that the original purpose was acquisition of open space, but because obviously these funds have to abide the 4 or 5 statutory purposes, and that was passed in the original ordinance, but that the projects for which, or purposes for which they would be spent on a year-by-year or even more than that basis if you want to accumulate it, is developed as part of the budget workshop, because otherwise, you're just setting up a situation where, every time we have an expenditure, like last meeting was for the Cameron Field Playground, because we're in a situation where our equipment is no longer compliant with our risk management policies and so forth, and you're going to set up a situation where everything has to go back and forth, and I just view it as like our own self-imposed fiscal cliff. We're going to constantly be waiting for feedback from them. I think we develop the policies, we develop the projects in the, or they can develop it, that would be most welcome, but as part of the budget process, so that going forward we know what our plans are.
It's an alternate funding as part of our capital plan. But just a side question, do we really have $1 million, or some of it has already been appropriated?
Well, we started with $1 million. We spent some on the 3rd Street acquisition, and that was roughly completely offset by what we took in this year, so we're probably back to about $1 million. I'd have to look it up.
But I thought there was some for the river corridor. No?
Question, is there some requirements to spend the money that is accumulated, or there's no time
There isn't a time
No,
requirement,
you-
there are restrictions, you can only use it for purposes
That
authorized.
restrictions that,
in
that,
online
I just.
registration.
The big gray area is maintenance of things. That, to me, is the big gray area.
You can't
Maintenance,
use it
whether-
for maintenance.
Well,
Yeah,
we can use it for maintenance of certain of open space projects. The question is, do you want to use it? This board set a policy years ago of not using it for maintenance, but there's some things, it's a gray line between maintenance
Right, is new
and
playground
replacement.
equipment
So if the
maintenance?
playground, equipment has to be replaced after 10 years, is that maintenance or is that new playground
It's a
equipment?
capital
And,
planning.
but for smaller things, so like we just spent X amount of dollars, mostly with a grant, on redoing the river, and certain things have to be done along that. So, Trustee Bowers pointed out there's a weed growing there that we need to remove, and there's a cost to doing that. Is that enhancing the river, or is that maintenance of the river? And it's a gray area of the whole thing. so.
Okay, but maintenance is not a gray area in the sense that the statute provides and our ordinance provides
Yes.
that it may be spent on maintenance of
Yes.
lands.
Right, yes.
Okay,
I mean, I said that
are
before.
set aside
No,
for
right.
conservation. It can't be spent on maintenance, you want to paint the building,
No.
No maintenance,
Right.
like, fix the swing or something like that. Not that kind of maintenance, not what we think of as
But
maintenance.
weeding is maintenance.
but it wasn't.
Yeah, well, nothing's being spent on weeding.
But one of the other ways of looking at it, it could be a sinking fund. You could set aside, say we want to buy
You
orange lawn.
could have a sinking fund.
Mary one is the easier
Or
one.
Mary lawn.
Either lawn.
Hypothetically speaking.
Right.
There are
lawns.
properties which
Yeah.
at some point may come about.
They're saying from their mouths to God's ears
You're
right
right.
now.
But we could set it as a sinking fund and say, okay, we'll set aside some of those funds for that particular purpose.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. And you can set aside a sinking fund as for maintenance for our
Correct.
historic
What does
buildings.
sinking,
Absolutely.
what does sinking?
A sinking fund, and by the way, it was used incorrectly earlier in the meeting. A sinking fund is actually a fund that's established by a government agency or an economic development agency or something in order to pay off debt that's been incurred in a better managed way. I don't know how to describe it more
It's like
than that. but-
depreciation.
Well, there's really two issues, and it's actually listed on the agenda as two issues. One is the policy for using the money, and the other is the policy for utilizing the committee.
Well, I think, I don't know which committee's going to do it, but I think we have to do both. I think the committee should automatically meet every year anyway, but I wouldn't even hurt for the committee to come back and tell us, some of what they feel that the committee should be used for. But I think that we need to set forth our policy, and I don't know when and where we're going to do this, but we need to set forth the policy of how we're going to spend the money. First, I think that has to be first and foremost, and then how we want to use the committee, or how we want the committee to be to proceed. But I don't think it's unfair for the committee to meet and come back with a recommendation from their opinions of what it should be.
I think
Can we ask them to do that at the January 22nd budget meeting?
Yeah,
I think that makes sense.
I don't know if we can find a member of the committee. Well, that's
It's right there. It's right there.
Well,
Right there, right there.
we know that.
But I think this.
So now I'm excited.
I think this started, a couple months ago when we were again the property on 3rd Street, when we realized there's some environmental remediation that needs to take place, and then, well, where does that money come from? Should it come from open space money? Should it, and again, it's a philosophical discussion as well as a policy discussion. That's why we thought that's what sort of.
But that was a
instigated-
bridge only. That was not intended to be a permanent way to finance it. That was simply, I believe, that was only intended to be a bridge.
No, it was a bridge, well, no,
It was for the
no,
matching
that-
money.
the remediation was not intended to be a bridge. What was the ultimate source? That was gonna-
Oh, the remediation, right, but the closing dollars,
Well,
the closing.
Well, that's why I
our share
drafted-
was permanent, and then we fronted the reimbursement portion from Green Acres for
Right.
cash flow.
That's why, I don't want to get ahead on the budget, but that's why I drafted the policy, because Barry came to us a few months ago and he said, how is this going to be funded, the remediation? Now, that property was one of the 10 or so properties that was on the list that was developed by the original Open Space Board to spend the 1.2, so it all came about as, I don't know.
Yeah, that was on the list.
To me, it was a surprise. I know you corrected me once, but to me, the whole thing was a surprise. I had nothing to do with it.
Immaculate Conception.
I had nothing to do with it.
Now, was the,
Immaculate Conception is all I can say.
Is there an ordinance that created the committee? Is it
Yes, there's a resolution.
Yeah,
Is
sure.
there a resolution?
What does it say?
I think we need
resolution.
Well, it says exactly what's been stated here. You can use it for open space acquisition, maintenance of those properties,
Well, no,
historic
no, no,
preservation.
the committee.
Yeah, what's the committee do?
No, the committee, we
Is there an
need
ordinance or
a,
resolution establishing the committee?
yes,
that says-
yes. This goes back
When was
to
that done?
2000 and
99.
99 it was
99. We also have to, you know, up the terms of people who are on the committee if they want to be on it again. And I think we have 2 openings, assuming all those people who were on it before want to stay.
Everyone said they wanted to stay with the exception of Brian, who made it conditional.
No, but one moved away. At least one member moved away and one member didn't want to be on anymore. I don't think Jonathan was on it, but,
Dan Peterson said he wanted to be
Dan
on it.
Shelf.
Well, we have to openly
Dan
vote.
Shelfa wanted to be on
we'll
it.
openly,
And Rob Fish wants to be on it.
okay.
So those are the 4.
And I assume Brian.
Brian said it depended on how we treated the committee.
He's nodding.
Only if the meetings are like this.
What about Dan? What about Dan?
Yeah, if you'd like to come up and speak real quick on it, that would be fine. Just introduce yourself, please.
You've been sitting here so long.
Did Dan
Get to say
shuffle?
something.
Yes,
Yeah,
he
they
was
said
there.
Dan
I can
something.
sit longer and not say things. Brian O'Leary, College Place, South Orange.
Just lift the microphone up, Brian, so we can.
Sure.
Thank you.
Is that better? Past chair of the Open Space Committee. I've been on it since its creation, I think in 2000. Committee stopped meeting really with any periodicity in 2009. It was after we'd received an inventory of all the spending that both the funds that had been raised and then dispersed over the first roughly 10 years of the committee. It was the first time we actually saw an entire listing of it. At that point, $750,000 had been spent, about 2/3 of it on the River Cord project, and all of it on projects that had never been formally or informally put before the committee. So essentially, without following the spirit of the law that's required. And that's actually the genesis of the summary that Michael gave about my particular frustration with being involved with the committee. The thing I was nodding my head about with respect to the acquisition of the property on 3rd Street is we had a chance to talk about briefly in the unnoticed meeting. Sorry about that. I would not have done that. I should have noted. I should have jumped on that myself. We're not actually appointed anymore. We're just citizens. But that property was actually on that list for an easement, and there may be reasons for the change in it. But had you come back to the committee, we would have told you very clearly why we put it on for an easement. And there's a very different set of reasons. You may still have overruled us. Trustees always have that right. But that's the kind of two-way dialogue that I think you might want to encourage, whether it's me or somebody else running the committee. Thanks.
And it came up, someone asked Barry, I have the resolution here about the powers of the committee, and it's very clear. It make recommendations regarding the overall administration of the municipal open space acquisition program, make recommendations concerning the implementation of the recreation open space master plan, develop and recommend a system to prioritize the selection of open space areas for acquisitions, the system to include considerations of existing municipal, county, and state plans, identification of geographic areas. It goes I don't know, I don't have to read this whole thing, but it says sort of what their powers are. But again, I was talking more broad as far as a policy as to whether, we as a board agree with the policy that before we use that money, we go to that committee for their vetting of that. Again, the analogy of the transportation committee. There's a policy adopted by this board that we don't do anything regarding transportation without sending it to the transportation committee first. That was a policy decision. And I think, personally, I think we should have a similar policy decision with this committee on how do we spend $1 million.
I have to disagree with you. You may have agreed what the policy should be, but I constantly have to remind you that it's not a policy until it's reduced to a resolution somehow. I mean, simply having discussed it here doesn't make it a
No, with transportation committee, there is a resolution. There is a resolution that states that as a policy. Correct, Howard?
Yeah.
Let me just address the transportation analogy, because I don't think it's exactly right. We've now passed a resolution saying transport matters should, get the benefit of, the engineers and other people with those kind of disciplines on the Transportation Advisory Committee. But the Transportation Advisory Committee has also adopted policies, sent policies here, like, for instance, the Complete Streets policy, that then guides its discretion as situations come up as to whether there should be traffic calming here or, so on and so forth. So that's the same kind of thing like I'm proposing with the capital maintenance policy to govern maintenance of lands. The policy, whether it comes up from the committee or comes up organically here, guides the discretion of that committee. So it's not like everything just goes there to be vetted as an expenditure. There are overriding policies that govern that.
I think you were on a right path where it is part of our budgeting process where we can allocate some of the funds coming out of the Open Space Trust Fund into projects that we have, that we want to, capital projects that we want to do in the next year.
That we want to prioritize.
And we prioritize them.
Exactly.
It's one way of funding them. Or we can say, this is a project that's going to take a long time, so that we have a sinking fund for it, that we set aside certain amounts of money every year so that we can acquire a particular piece of property.
But make up an example. You know, I'm making total hypothetical example. You want to renovate the skate house, Janine wants to do the river corridor, and Mark wants to...
And Nancy wants shade structures at the pool.
And Nancy wants shade structures at
That's
the pool. Right. That's right.
All right.
And Nancy wants a bigger community garden too.
That's right.
I actually wanted a dome at the pool, but that's another...
A dome at the pool.
Right.
You know, so
we talk about
how do you go through? It would be
That's
great
part
to
of our
have
capital
this,
plan.
but it would be great to have this committee come up with recommendations and prioritize them to help us do that.
That's my point.
They're free to do that.
They're free, yeah, absolutely.
By the way, the Transportation Committee, we went to that path because we were getting bogged down with so many discussions about transportation that we wanted to take it off and have a committee review all these things rather than try and spend the time here, and that's why it came about.
Well,
so.
right, the same point, right? We could argue about skate house versus dome versus garden, right? So
Open space is much easier because it's spending money, so it's much easier for us. You know, we're in government.
Yeah, we're good at that, obviously.
So I'm fine with having the committee come forth with the recommendations. I'm fine with the
great.
board coming up with a set of policies. And again, it's, you know, they come to us, it doesn't mean that we're going to always be in sync with them.
Well, sure, like any advisory committee, right?
But I would like them to meet, and I would like to get their input, because, you know, the more people, and they might have, you know.
But part of our capital plan, there are a set of pieces in that capital plan that qualify for open space.
Yes. And by the way, we can have them vet what we want them to you know.
Well, that's where I'm going. Okay. We can give them that list.
Yeah.
That says, here are a bunch of projects which qualify for open space. Come back and give us some feedback. We have priorities as well.
That's great.
Correct. That's
great.
what I'm suggesting.
There's nothing wrong with that.
But it's sort of put the cart before the horse. We should do that before we spend the money. You know, and we should engage the committee is all I'm proposing. Because I think they've been dormant for quite a number of years.
We didn't want to hold up Nancy's playground.
Right.
I knew they would come back at some point.
So, what's the action that you want to take next? Are we bringing this to the committee?
Well, we should, if there's going to be, if the terms are expired, we should advertise the committee for openings.
Okay. And on the parallel path, which committee is handling the open space committee?
Well, I'm okay with having planning and zoning do it, but I think that the policy and priority has to be part of the budget process. Because I think anything doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Because you have to identify what your priorities are, what your grant opportunities are that you're going to need your match for, which obviously is going to come out of open space, and whatever else you want to hold on to as a sinking fund or anything else, and that's it. I mean, those are basically the three areas where it's going to be divvied.
You get all this in the minutes? All right. Okay.
Okay.
That's it.
2013 capital maintenance budget items requested by the police department. Trustee Bauer.
I just wanted to make sure, following on, because we didn't have a full discussion of the letter that we received from the chief or the letter that we received from the PBA head, that those items were going to be included in a budget workshop discussion, I guess on the 22nd. I think they came too soon for the last budget workshop, but I just wanted to make sure that they were going to be vetted by administration or whomever, finance, and discussed, because I certainly was surprised at some of those, and you know, the reaction not being on the public safety committee could be anywhere from yeah, we don't really need that, or that's an exaggeration, to, yeah, that's critical, and let's fund it immediately. And I, you know, because I'm not on public safety, I just wanted to make sure that that was going to come with a recommendation and come to budget.
It will.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, did we talk about the maintenance policy for open space funds?
Not here.
Not really, right? Are we going?
We did.
Yeah, I thought we kind of,
Yeah, I had anticipated that the clerk would distribute the policy so that everybody could look at it, because I'd like to have it adopted, so we could table it for the January conference agenda. It was previously developed by me and Finance, Howard and Mark, and distributed to the Open Space Board for their consideration at the December 6th meeting. So that was just to come back, having been to the two committees with a recommendation to this board, but for whatever reason, the clerk could not find that policy, and therefore it was not included in your packet.
Yeah, it's funny, because I told you, and I sent you that.
I know, and I forwarded it to her. I told
I
her.
sent you the email today. You know, I got the email,
I know.
but the attachment disappeared. So it's like,
Yeah. No, I think we have a problem with our email server here, and I indicated that I would be bringing this to our IT manager's attention.
Right.
I double-checked my emails, and there was nothing.
But you got my
Sending, receiving.
I know. And then I told
Okay.
her again tonight. I said,
Yeah.
Howard forwarded it to me, because she said, I don't have it. I don't know what you're
You
talking
gave me a
about.
date
So
and
then
time.
I told her.
I had the email, but the attachment wasn't there.
No, I have it.
Anyway, so we'll just put it on for a
Okay.
conference agenda at
For
But
dis-
anyway,
for
it spells
discussion,
out-
For
not-
discussion, not for, yeah, right, not for.
well, no, because it's come through two committees now.
No, but we haven't discussed it here yet.
Well, that's not my policy. I'm just going to draft it as a resolution. That can be the discussion.
Well, let's get,
So we'll discuss it at the conference agenda, then act on it at the
right.
meeting.
but we're not going to be taking any action at the conference agenda.
That was my
Right,
point.
right.
Oh, we'll be taking action on one item.
All right.
Yes,
This
Maureen.
is an
exception of
example.
the very
This is an
first
example.
one.
Now it's
Right.
going to wait another
Another month, right.
It's not. It was drafted in November, considered by Finance in December, considered at Open Space, and now because
But-
of the failure to get it in the packet, it's not going to be considered until January 28th.
But
That's ridiculous.
it was not accepted by Open Space Committee. There were serious objections to it. In fact, we just talked a lot about that, of using the open space money for maintenance. Like
Actually, there were no objections at the open space meeting. They declined to consider it because first they wanted to vet all the things that you just put on the agenda.
right, so they haven't vetted it. Okay, so it's even better. They haven't vetted it yet, so it hasn't gone through a committee yet.
My view is they had an opportunity. I have no idea why they want to do it. It's the same as when you send an ordinance to the planning board. They have 30 days to consider it. If they decline to do that, we're free to act. I mean, I'm not going to set up a situation where we're holding ourselves back. I mean, you know, the perfect example is I'm trying to draft a policy that will allow things that we're already doing, like, for instance, and I had to lean over to Barry at the last meeting and say, what is the Cameron Field, 168,000 or whatever it is, what is that coming out of? He says open space. I'm just trying to draft a policy that allows that.
But your policy also, it explicitly says weeding is appropriate. It said weeding. It was an example of appropriate use of the money.
No, it didn't say
It
that.
absolutely did, Janine. I can pull it up. It
I
said,
can't wait to
Send
discuss
it
it
around,
at the next meeting.
send it around again in the next couple of days. Everyone will send comments back. to the
Removal of
conference.
invasive species.
correct.
Yeah.
That's weeding.
No, it's not. You don't have any idea what an invasive species is.
But that's
It wasn't
maintenance.
about-
But that's
you know,
maintenance.
It's Sal and Tommy's recommendation. I didn't even know there was dodo
Some
weed. that
some
was,
weeds are not invasive species.
I
Dodo
don't
weed
know.
is terrible.
Yeah, we're gonna lose our investment there because Tecton
Is that
or
the one
somebody
that has those
it's
huge
the-
roots?
It's the, no, it's these little
Japanese?
tendrils
No,
that
it's not the
kill the
Japanese.
plants. I don't know.
Not to make the discussion any longer, but I think we should go, with the weed issue, I really think that DPW should have people on staff, honestly, I don't want it, it's gonna sound really sarcastic, but know a weed from a plant, and I don't mean to be sarcastic, and that can really manage the plantings we have both on the river and downtown. You know, it's been a pet peeve of mine for years now, but I think that, forget this resolution that you're bringing forward, that's something that DPW should look at. Because I had someone come up to me just out of the blue at the SID meeting, came up to me and said, what's going on? You guys are planting plants downtown in the shade that should be in the sun, and plants that should be in the sun, they're in the shade, and the wrong plants are being planted. And I agreed with the gentleman with that. He came out of the blue. He didn't know it was a pet peeve of mine. He started talking to me about it.
I thought
So that's something I think we should take back
Most
to
of those
DPW.
plants were done by the Parking Authority, weren't they?
Isn't the Village Center Alliance going to take over the planting beds?
Yes.
Okay, so that eliminates that.
They are? I don't know if they know that.
Other parking.
No,
Parking lot.
Yeah, are there any other questions or comments on that issue?
Yeah, I have one. Did we pass a resolution, it was before me, it's when I was on the CBAC, about maintenance, use of Open Space Trust Fund money for
No.
maintenance?
Apparently not.
No, we debated it.
We debated it,
I
but I thought the
believe we did
resolution was...
not.
I thought we passed it.
Yeah, we have
I
to do
don't
some
know.
research.
I didn't think
Why don't
so.
we ask if Robin
I
can
didn't
search
think
the
so.
archives for that?
The real issue back then was the dredging of the river,
Right.
Which never happened.
the
That's why I
former-
think it
the
didn't-
former village
that's why I think it
administrator
didn't
wanted to
result
take
in
the- yeah,
a
he-
resolution.
What,
Yeah.
you wanted to switch the direction of the river? What did you
No,
just
no,
say?
no, dredge.
Oh,
dredging.
dredge, I didn't hear
We
what
wanted
you
to
said.
widen the river and make it more like a river, not a stream, so we're gonna, no, they're gonna dredge it to make the
The
other
Corps of
code can
Engineers
do that.
requires it to be cleaned every once in a while.
But my
Periodically.
argument, the argument was always, I don't, you can't even do that anymore, right? That's the,
All right, can we move this meeting along, please?
okay, it's too late for that.
2013 grant opportunities. I was hoping that we would have either Laura Harris or an exit memo from Laura Harris describing at least these areas that I know that she's been directly involved in with what the status of our opportunities are, what the status of our ongoing applications or, deadlines that are coming up that are repeating that we know about, and where we haven't hit the mark. So I would just ask Barry, what is the status of an exit memo? Because I sent an email on which I copied you as well, requesting that. She said that her last day was going to be December 25th, and she would do her best. But do her best, I mean, obviously we need to download a lot of information from this person who's been our grants person for at least 10 years.
Yeah, no, I've actually met with her at length this afternoon, going through things, where's in the file, what's in the computer, what's in the spreadsheets, what's in the physical files. We're working on getting as comprehensive a transition as the time will permit, but I'm comfortable that we'll be up to speed.
Well, she had one major one that she never responded to, and that's the energy.
Yeah, the energy seems to be a question, and that's one of the reasons I put it first there, because Trustee
there was-
Levinson and I had some back and forth. I don't know where the ball was dropped, or even if the ball was dropped, and exactly,
Or if the ball
what
was
was
picked
supposed to
up.
be. But the bottom line is, can we, how are we going to receive that? Are we just going to receive a written memo, or, because I'd like the opportunity to ask a lot of questions, since I've been directly involved in a lot of these, and I don't know that I'm going to have the opportunity to do that, so. Or
Okay,
should I do that on my own?
No, I will follow up and get her, I'll get back to you on exactly what
Okay.
format and how it works.
Can I just
Maybe
add?
Howard and I should do it, or we could do it as part of finance or something.
That's, you schedule an appointment for them to sit down with her, since especially
Well, I
Trustee Bauer has been so intimately involved with all of these. She would be the best person to know what specific questions to ask and to get the information we need going forward, as far as institutional knowledge transfer.
Okay. Last discussion item is ICMA next steps. Mr. Lewis and I spoke a little bit today about that, and as per what?
What's the next item? I don't have it.
Huh?
I had nothing else on my,
ICMA next steps, which
Oh, okay.
it's mentioned
We
earlier.
realized it was on executive, should have been at this point now on.
Right. So Mr. Lewis and I discussed this a little bit, kind of following up on our discussion from our special meeting last Thursday, and it seemed like, and correct me if I have a misunderstanding, that our suggestion was there be a committee formed to oversee the process, including the items that get delegated to other committees, because there are a number of these items that are already being discussed in finance, for example, and maybe one or two in legal as well. And possibly public safety. So there'd be a group of people that is overseeing all of the items that came out of the report and making sure that each of them is being delegated to a responsible an appropriate committee, that all of them are being followed up on, and then to bring those back to that group at the end of it and have a discussion in that group. Is that about right?
Yeah, I think to try and assign it to one new committee to start from scratch, one would be counterproductive because, again, a number of the sort of the IT technical concerns have already been in the works. Some of the sick leave and other policies have been working their way through legal and personnel. And I also think it would be sort of overwhelming for one committee to try and take on the whole scope of that report. But I do think there needs to be one body sort of overseeing the whole process that ultimately gathers it all and then, I guess reviews it.
But there's another level. In some way, we need to triage the report to say these are the things that we want to consider.
I'd like to see that group do that in the very beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's basically make a list of all of the items that came out of the report and say which one of these are getting assigned and which priority are they. And I would like to also see that group set a deadline because, one of the things that I think we were all concerned about was this kind of angst among the police department about what's happening. So now the report's over and everybody's kind of like, oh, well, the report's over. It's like, well, wait, but we're not taking action today, tomorrow, on Friday or last Thursday. So now that angst is just going to continue the more that we prolong the decisions that are going to have to come out of the report. So the quicker that we can do that, the better, especially prioritizing some of the bigger issues and the things that have already, are being worked on.
Well, some of those bigger issues get reflected in capital budgeting.
That's part of our budget.
Which may have a year delay in it. Well, or at least adjustments to the capital budget. If the findings come further down in the year.
Well, it depends on the magnitude of it.
So I'm going to read off some names here of maybe people that could be on this kind of overall group that could get together, maybe even this week to begin that. I guess my first question would be, is this group going to be inclusive of the police department and the unions as well, or is this going to be just a working group of the board?
I think it should
I
be
would
inclusive.
The board.
Yeah, and then I think then that group can then convene on certain subjects, additional meetings with members of the department. I think some of these policy decisions and priorities.
Do we think though, as far as for example, establishing which items are priorities and things like that, I feel like the chief's input in the unions might be valuable. On those sort of things.
Well,
I wouldn't want to make those decisions in a vacuum about that. I don't mind making the decisions about where to delegate things in a vacuum because it's just our internal work process. But as far as decisions being, well, we're going to look at this item now, but not this one. I don't know if I would feel comfortable doing that without.
Well, the other side of it is that like schedule changes, I think the union is not going to agree with taking that as a priority.
No.
We need a and we have that as a top priority.
I think we're maybe overcomplicating this. The way when you look at the report, I really think it breaks down into a few key areas. There's public safety, there's public works, and legal and finance and IT, and legal and personnel. Right? There's nothing with recreation. There's nothing with planning and zoning. So it really narrows. It really could fit into the buckets of our standing committees. And I think if somebody sort of took the report and kind of carved it up and said, okay, these 5 items are personnel issues, these 4 items are finance, IT issues, these are public, and just divvy up the report and have each of the existing committees focus on that, and then we have to come back here anyway. I don't think
you're repeating what we said.
No, well, I'm hearing the formation.
Before you got to form a committee to divvy it up.
No, I can
go through the report and divvy it up.
Right. I don't know that we need a committee to divvy it up.
Yeah, I think Barry and Alex can divvy. Don't you guys feel you can divvy it up? Just Barry and
Yeah,
Alex can divvy it up, right?
You two can do that.
Yeah. It'll be quicker too.
There's certain IT things or certain policies.
Yeah, I think it's fairly clear.
Why don't we try and do that? And if for some reason we hit some sort of roadblock and there are too many items that are interdisciplinary or something between different committees, maybe we come back. But this committee would have been probably the 2 of us and you, and yeah. So
and you know what?
Pretty much the same working group anyway.
And if it's interdisciplinary, I'm so tired now. One of the ways to facilitate that is to have it in one committee and they do whatever's appropriate for them and then pass it on to the next committee.
That's right. That's the process we should get used to
simple.
using anyway when we have items that should go between committees.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll follow up on that.
And timeline.
And we'll figure out a timeline.
Okay.
And maybe each committee then can also, when they first consider the items, figure out, maybe we'll put a little quick memo together, sending the items to each of the different committees. Okay, is there any new business? Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
No, we're going to
recess.
motion to recess to
Thank you.
January 14, 2000.
So there's a motion to recess by Trustee Rosner, seconded by Trustee Gould. All in favor?
To win.
Recess.
Okay.
Till January 14th.
It's the shortest agenda.